Welcome committee members to our and members of the public. We apologize for the delay. We had some technical difficulties getting this up and streaming on YouTube. This is our special Standards and Assessment Committee meeting for November 15th, 2021. We are here to discuss and work on a gender guidance document, gender identity guidance document. We are not taking live public input tonight. We have had live input in our past standards and assessment meetings. We've also had a pretty good volume of written input, and we appreciate all those folks who've weighed in on this subject. It's a sensitive subject. There are a lot of feelings on all sides of many of these issues, and we appreciate people bringing their opinions and information to us so that we can consider those things. We know that everybody out there who's helping us and commenting on this has our students' best interest at heart, and we appreciate that. We'll go ahead and start by referring to the, and Patty, are you driving? Can you throw your document up, please? We just need to make sure we've got the right title on this document. I think the working title that we have is going to be on your screen in just a minute. And I do need to say, we relaxed the Roberts Rules of Orders for this meeting. We're going to use this as a working meeting. And we'll be moving through without, unless we get stuck and have to go to a more formal approach, we're just going to move through this with kind of head nods and people agreeing on the different aspects of the document. And when we get to the end, then we'll have a vote to request that staff finish some things for us and move this to the next meeting, I'm hoping. So Patty, have we got a shared screen?
Chair Hansen, while she's pulling that up, do you want to have motions on each piece, like for example, the title? Not on the title, because I actually really have an opinion on this. I think it should be gender, not necessarily identity, gender document. What is it? Now I've missed the other piece, sorry.
Okay, yeah, the topic that we had before, I'll get Patty's document.
I know I've got to pull, I didn't print out all my papers.
Yeah, hang on just a second and we'll get hers. It sounds like Patty's computer is.
Oh, it's a gender identity guidance document. I actually would like to take identity out of it and just do a gender guidance document, but we can, if there's more discussion on that,
Yeah, will you, because I don't think we're going to do this with motion. Just tell us why. Why is that important to you, Laura, that we pull identity out of that?
Because I think sometimes there isn't, children or students are not choosing an identity. It was their sexual birth. And so that would be their gender. And so it's not always about identity. It's about sometimes by the gender they were born with.
Help me understand a little bit more. Maybe other committee members have questions, but I think most of the issues that I'm looking at are really about gender identity, transgender kids and kids who are transitioning, use of pronouns that don't match their biological sex, those kind of things. So is that, I mean, when we talk about gender, then it widens things up a whole bunch, I think.
Well, I may be happy to come back to this topic and do a title after we've finished our bullet points, if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah, no problem. Does anybody else want to weigh in on this right now? Janet, please.
When Laura was talking, it jumped into my mind that in some of these documents, it refers to maybe kids who have gender identity issues using a separate bathroom. But then it also goes back and states, you know, if regular kids feel uncomfortable with some of the transgender kids using their bathroom, they too could go to a separate bathroom facility. So I think maybe there are cases in which this document may refer to all kinds of gender issues.
Okay.
That's what came to my mind when she mentioned that.
Well, maybe let's take Laura's suggestion and come back to that. If we can just keep that as a working title right now, let's do our work with the rest of the document and see which one fits, what fits the best. That'd be okay. The next item here, review the purpose statement of the document. I just jotted down a couple of thoughts about why we are taking this on. I'd like to have some kind of a lead into the document. And I know there's some other proposed language, but this is just a suggestion to get us started. We realize there are a growing number of transgender students, or we recognize there are a growing number of transgender students. USB is fielding many questions from LEAs. The population of students, this population of students has been identified as having risk factors that need to be addressed. The legal environment's rapidly changing, and USB wants to promote compliance with current law as providing this document for guidance and to provide consistency statewide. So those were some thoughts. Do we have, if we want to jump to another place or a place we can edit, I think we can just put some bullet points in about the points we want to make in our purpose statement and get those on. Do you want to do that right here, Patty, or? Okay. Any items that we want to address or make sure are contained in our purpose statement?
Chair, I actually really like the last sentence, and that I think that creates a great purpose statement.
Okay, thank you. One other idea that I've seen is that we could include some information that was in actually the first iteration of this document, where we talk about equity, educational equity, and that being part of our purpose to make sure that all students are able to have equal opportunities to education. Is that important for us to include here, or are we okay with something concise like this?
I think our first sentence needs to be broader. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, my screen just did something weird. So, and what I mean by that is this focus on just transgender students. I don't think that is the full narrative. I think we've got kids that, especially as we're moving further over the next, I don't know, over the last 10 years or so, you've got students who began the transgender transitioning or the gender transitioning process and then have desisted in that. So I think there's a broader narrative that needs to take place here, including, and I know we're saying it in law here, but those constitutional protections that apply to all students.
Jenny, so I actually really want to just use the last sentence there.
Okay. You're
not everything
right
about
down.
it. I really like that, just that last sentence as the statement, why we're doing it. But I appreciate Chair Hansen's piece in there that to provide consistency and equitable opportunities statewide. I don't mind that piece in there as well, Chair.
Okay. Jenny, when you say broaden it.
Well, I'm fine with what Laura proposed. I wasn't realizing she was saying eliminate the top half. So I think that is a more accurate statement there. And then the other items can be in the disclaimer, the background information. So.
Okay. How's the committee with, so we'd just be going with that second checkbox then as a purpose statement for the document? Is that, we okay? I wish I could get all of you on my screen so I could see you all at once. I've got one of you cut off all the time. You're okay with that? We can move forward?
Well,
Sure.
I have a question.
Sure.
So as I was looking back through and I came upon House Bill 399, and then of course that was very heavily amended, and the sponsor of that bill didn't even end up voting for it in the end. Then the next year it came back around, and that's when conversion therapy was done away with. The reason I bring that up is I want to jump now to the letter, and this is the really important part. The letter that we received from Weaver and Salt Lake, and I can't remember all of them, they're listed here. Davis, Granite, Canyons, and Nebo. One of the things they mentioned is, quote, several LEAs have adopted a generic USBA policy written in 2015. But as you know, with this shifting landscape, it would likely need updating. Many school boards would not support a gender support policy with the types of detailed protocols outlined in this guide, referring to our guide. And so I see some pushback from the school districts, especially these large school districts, in regards to this whole idea of the need for us to do it. But I'm just wondering if we're in the right space on this. I think there's certain aspects of what we're talking about that needs legislation. And then there's parts that need to be addressed at the local level. By doing this document, we're saying that the local level needs to adhere to what we put out. And further in that document, they point out some dangers of having this document that we're creating. Anyway, I have some concerns about that, about the need
Well,
for guidance.
We're down the road a ways as far as, moving into this area to create a guidance document. It is a guidance document. Just to be clear, this isn't a rule. This isn't any kind of a policy. The policy would just be, effective on us as the USBE. There was a letter that's included in your backup from some of the education attorneys for some of the large districts. We do have a lot of smaller LEAs and charter schools where it may just be a one school LEA.
But they can be a part of USBA, correct?
We're not sure that they all feel the same about this because of the changes that have been occurring. So I don't know. I mean, do you want us to do something here, or you're just voicing concerns about the direction we're headed?
Yeah, I just voicing concerns.
So
Okay.
let me just be
Move
clear.
on.
Yeah, just one second. As we move through this, though, we also have full latitude to make these as prescriptive or as general as we want in each of these areas where we want to give guidance. So, we do have, it doesn't have to be as prescriptive as some of these sample documents that we've seen. I mean, we have a lot of latitude as far as what we want to do. Go ahead, Jenny.
So I was just trying to seek some clarification. That was in response to the original document that was put out that they were responding to, if that's accurate. And then USBA is writing the policies for the recommended policies for these individuals. So because of that, we're not to weigh in. I'm just trying to figure out the rationale there.
Would you like me to respond?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so they do say a little bit more. It says most LEAs have determined that handling matters on a case-by-case basis is the only way a school can navigate these matters in their communities while protecting the needs of transgender students. And they bring up further, and this is probably the key point, they bring up further is, well, we put out this document, even if it is only, here's our suggestions for what you should do. In fact, the ACLU has told me, I'm not sure who me is, I think it's the Weber School District Attorney. They would argue adamantly that a student has a right to privacy in his or her sexuality and or gender identity, even from parents. That wasn't what I was looking for.
Yeah.
What they talked about was, if we put out this model policy and they vary anything from that, is that going to be used against them? Whereas if the USBA comes out with a policy, that's an adopted policy by their group versus USBE comes up with a policy. That's my thoughts.
Okay, not a policy. This is a guidance document.
Excuse me.
Again,
You're right.
I'm
Thank you.
at this stage in today's meeting, I think I'm just going to move us forward, Brent. We had a chance to discuss this previously. We had a motion we all voted for to move forward and work on this document. And I'm not sure, I mean, how we deal with your comments right now when we've got 3 hours ahead of us to work on something. And
I agree.
okay. Okay. We will move forward then to the topics that we think should be addressed. There's a list here, and there's also the table of contents in the document that Holly put together, the comparison document that I think everyone's been looking at. But let's just make sure, if you can scroll down to number 4 on this, these are the things that we said we wanted to have included in our guidance document. Some sort of disclaimer. I think the disclaimer basically says that this is just an overview of the law, and some general guidance and specific situations need to be dealt with the advice of an attorney who is aware of the specifics of the situation. There's several different examples of that, and we can look at those and decide, what fits for our document. Background, we've kind of talked about that, why, what is the background for the document we're putting together. Age considerations, everything from very young students up to students who are over 18 and are considered to be adults in many aspects, including with FERPA. Facilities, so locker rooms, bathrooms, determination of gender identity. How is that, how do we know if someone is transgender or has assumed another gender identity that's not their biological sex? Dress codes, how should those be applied? Overnight trips was something we wanted to look into. Records, privacy and confidentiality. How are those handled? Physical education, other school activities and clubs, preferred names and pronouns. I think that's actually what prompted or partially prompted this discussion is some surveys that had been sent out by some LEAs requesting pronouns or preferred pronouns. Educator responsibilities. We discussed moving the decision-making out of the classroom and to a counselor or administrator so that we have more uniformity in decisions. Parental involvement is a key to this. And state and federal law, OCR guidance, other areas that are unsettled in law, and Title IX guidance. And Brian will help us with that as we move through. Mandatory reporting requirements for DCFS. If there is evidence or suspicions of abuse, then it comes into play. And then athletics. We said before that we were going to leave that to the High School Athletics Association. And I think if you'll scroll down a little bit further, Patty, there's a summary of how that policy works here. Talking about parental consent and records, the gender identification on records. I don't know that we really need to get into that now if we're still content or okay with letting UHSAA handle the high school sports that they are over. We may want to come back and refer to this though as we're talking about intramural sports or clubs or that sort of thing that happen at a school level. Keep scrolling down, please. Policies already in place in Utah, those are included in our backup material, or pieces of those are included in the material we have today. I think we've seen those before. And similar guidance documents by other states are also referred there. And then definitions, we decided we would move that to another document. And so we'll refer to a definitions document that we're going to use for many of these trainings and guidance and other policies.
Chair Hansen, I
Yes,
apologize because I can't raise my hand,
no
but there's
problem.
questions, and part of the communication is to be clear, going back to the title of this document, that it is guidance and not policy. So policy would be binding and guidance is just recommendations. And so I don't know, board member Straight, if that's helpful. The intent was not to create a policy or a rule, but just that guidance, which is recommendations for other LEAs to be able to look at. So I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Thank you. I knew that. I just keep forgetting.
Yeah, thanks. So then if we go to the other document, I guess, I don't know if you can split screen and show both of those, but we just need to make sure we have a list of all the things that we want to include in this document. These are the things that were included here. And is that still you, Patty, or is that Holly on the screen?
Yeah, we have Jeff that's presenting now.
Jeff's got it, okay. So if we can just move through and see if there are any items that need to be added to this list of topics to be addressed, and we can add those onto this table of contents, and then we can move forward. Disclaimers, background, age considerations, facilities, gender identity, overnight trips, phys ed, other school activities. I guess clubs is not listed there. We could add that. So on the other school activities, there's a note here for clubs. We could add that to this because I want to shift over and start using the gender identity guidance comparison document. Preferred names, pronouns is okay. Educator responsibilities, taking or decision-making out of classrooms. And then we do need to add parental involvement. And
We don't have educator responsibility either, Chair.
okay, so educator responsibility goes on there. DCFS reporting requirements.
Chair, would survey participation be included in one of these others?
Let's make sure it's on there. I was just looking at that as well. So if there's one of those that we want to tack that onto, that's fine, or we can just put it on separately and make sure we include it. But
Chair Hansen, since we were talking earlier about that, I've started to pull it out, the language I could find, and it's at the bottom. I haven't linked it yet because I'm just trying to pull that out of what I've been able to find. But if Jeff scrolls down to the bottom of the gender identity guidance comparison, you'll see that I'm starting to pull out the survey information.
well, let's just include that then as a separate item here on the table of contents and just put surveys.
And Brian says that there is some issue of preferred pronouns, so go with preferred. I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah, I see, Brian. We can else, but maybe preferred names, pronouns, and / surveys. Okay.
Yeah.
On the left-hand Google Docs, if you can scroll down further to make sure that we picked up all those other items. I think that's it. So definitions, we didn't, I don't believe it's listed here. We wanted to refer out to our other definitions document, but we will need to have that in the document. So it says for definitions, please refer to such and such. Okay, is that a comprehensive list for us? I guess we can always add to it if we find something as we go through, but are those good
Oh,
enough?
I have a couple items. You can tell me where they fit. I think the staff would go under educator responsibilities, probably. That's a note that I have. And then I have constitutional protections, and that may fit under a number of these, but wanted to make sure those were included.
Okay, so we had legal state and federal laws over here. We have background up here. Somewhere we need to have the legal overview, which would go all the way from constitutional to US law, Utah state law, rules that we have in place, case law.
Yeah, legal overview, federal and state.
Yeah,
And then the other item I have listed is curriculum content, and that could be whether that's under including library content, which seems to be a very hot topic right now. So those two items, I don't know if those would fit under age considerations, which seems to be an appropriate spot, or just as a general item in and of itself.
okay. Help us understand, Jenny, why that one is specific to gender identity and not just a general one that maybe we should address separately.
Well, it could be. We're talking about a lot of content is coming in book bundles and other areas that are specific to LGBTQ content. But there has been a lot of concern over the content of those. And I don't know if those are specific organizations that are intending to bring things in that violate other legal, including the items that are pornographic in nature. And I'd be happy to send on some resources for those that are interested in that. So that could be addressed in another area, but it just seems to be focused in this particular area at this time.
Okay, yeah, I recognize the concern. I just wonder if it's a more general concern. I mean, right now it might be specific to this area, but maybe when we, for me, I guess it doesn't seem like it fits so great in this
So you
one. And
do-
maybe that's something that we as a committee should ask board leadership to give us, as a topic to take on separately.
I think it could be broader narrative too, as in how educators are allowed to present information within the classroom and specific to gender discussions, what's appropriate, that type of a thing.
And then we get into our sex ed kind of discussion as well, right? Can we list that just with an asterisk? And let's work through the other things, and then let's see if that really fits here, or if we want to make that a separate item. And I think we as a committee could request, I guess, yeah, library materials, or really, you're talking about inappropriate materials, right?
Yeah,
Jenny?
that would be accurate.
Okay. So just inappropriate materials. Okay,
Chair, we also didn't move over athletics, and even though we're not going to have a long discussion, I think we need to have it on our list.
I agree. Same as the definitions, it just needs to refer us to.
Yes, I just didn't want to lose it.
Chair Hansen, you're cutting out.
the
Can't
other
hear you.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to kill the video, I guess, here. Okay, is the audio okay?
Yes,
All right. You won't have to look at me then for a while. Don't be too happy about that, Laura. Okay, let's go to the top of the list then, and we'll start working. Again, just want to get the bullet points that we feel need to be included in each of these. Let's look at disclaimers. We can just scroll down to that one, or I think we've got it hot linked maybe, so we can go to that. We can see what some of these other sample documents, and I want to say sample documents, not example documents. Every state has a different political climate. Some states haven't waded into this space, others have. But I think it's helpful for us to look at the way things are laid out and some of the things that are said, not thinking that we have to adopt those. They're not Utah documents, but we can look at those and see how helpful that is. So disclaimers.
Chair Hansen, may I tell Jeff something as he's trying to navigate?
Sure.
Jeff, the PDF is the one that has the links on the titles. If you'll go over to the left where you've got the that outline, then you can go from that link if you want. The PDF has the titles linked.
Okay. Does anybody want to lead off with some language?
Chair
for the-
Hansen,
Yes.
I have a couple of considerations or recommendations. I have some recommended wording, but
Okay.
I can send those on for people to consider. I've sent on a little bit. One of those is it's the document that Holly Bell sent out earlier from the World Professional Association of Transgender Health, where they're just acknowledging the factors contributing to gender identity development in adolescence is still evolving and not yet fully understood by scientists, clinicians, community members, and other stakeholders in equal measure. And then another organization also, their polarized views and mixed evidence regarding treatment options for people presenting with gender identity concerns, especially children and young people. It is important to understand the different factors, complexities, theories, and research related to it. In other words, it's just giving a general, this is an ongoing field of research and study, and that there's various, perceptions of it. And then that our guidance should take into account considerations both within the community, within families, within students, and to be careful. And as Brent had stated earlier, that this is, a case by case kind of way that we deal with things. So, like I said, I kind of have some statements there that I could send on if that's the best way to do that. Just some recommendations, also recommending that, I'll just read this part. The document is provided for educational purposes only and contains information associated with Utah law, is not to be an exhaustive treatment of the law on the subject, nor is it intended to substitute for the advice of an attorney. And then, so there's just that kind of closure there, which would be just kind of that broad narrative, and then some very specific things to our community and our laws. And then that, they should always seek consultation with attorneys before acting on certain things in a case by case basis.
Okay. Now we've got a doodle poll coming up now. Here we go. Okay, so Jenny, I know you sent that document to committee members. And I don't know if everyone can look at that and see, or, how we want to get that in front of us. I think incorporate.
You want me to copy it and send it on to someone? I don't.
I think Patty, I sent that on to Patty because I thought.
Oh, you
we
did?
were discussing it,
Okay.
so,
I got it. I will put it in the document.
okay,
At least as a recommendation, we can.
yeah. Sounds like, I think that adopts some of the language that's in that original draft from the original USBE draft. I have, maybe while we're pulling that up, I have questions about the need to include maybe that first paragraph. I like the second and the third paragraphs. I wonder about the first one, if that's helpful or not. Frankly, I don't think, I think that's maybe not necessary for the purpose of the document, but I'd certainly like to hear what committee members think.
Sure, Hanson, I would agree with that, but I do think that narrative needs to be part of maybe even the background then, if not part of the disclaimer element, just because it does talk about an evolving field, not a settled science kind of a thing, and that we're learning and finding more information out, and that there are contradicting evidences that we need to be cautious of, so.
Okay, for this area, maybe then, can we agree to look at those second two paragraphs, the second and third paragraphs? And then we can come back to the first paragraph.
I think that would be fair, yes.
Okay. So Jeff, could you help us with that and just give us paragraphs 2 and 3? So the guidance doesn't anticipate every situation, consideration of the impact on students, families, and community, accommodations. Any comments from committee members? Staff, is there something in there that we ought to be talking about?
I would say I have in there educational purposes only. I wonder if it's provided for guidance only, or if we want to, I don't know if it wants to be just a little different on that.
No, I like guidance better than education. So.
Okay, so we could easily
Or
change that.
guidance only. Get rid of purposes and just put guidance is provided for guidance only.
And Chair, do we have any, and Jenny, do we have any issues with just putting information associated with just Utah law? Because we are going to be looking at federal law and how it works inside of our Utah law and constitution.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
Or can we just say law, or do you want to be very specific? I don't know. Just throwing that out.
I do think we want to make sure we articulate Utah law, but then whatever general narrative you want to, that would be fine too.
so it contains information regarding federal and state law. I mean, this is a Utah document. It will say that at the top, that it's the USB creating it.
And are we going to have, and Brian maybe can help us here, are we going to have any issues with telling them to consult with their own attorneys, or is it intended to substitute for any advice of an attorney? Should we stop there, or do we need to be telling them to consult? I kind of hate to tell somebody to consult with an attorney.
Say it, encourage them to consult, and I think Jenny's already got that in here.
Brian,
Consult with your, can you hear me okay?
now you can.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, consult with your own attorney, I would consult with or obtain legal counsel regarding issues that that relate to this guide. Something just general like that, I think would be appropriate. I don't have to be too specific.
Okay,
And then while I'm speaking, the first of those red paragraphs, it ends with legal and civil rights of all students. I would recommend putting that clause at the beginning of that sentence, because I think that's going to be kind of paramount. What the courts are saying, to the extent they are saying stuff on the issues we're going to talk about, then that's going to be the first consideration. The way this is placed at the end of the sentence makes it sound like it's kind of the last of all these considerations. So I would, all right, sorry, Jeff, I'll be more specific. So it starts with this guidance does not indicate every situation that may occur, period. Consideration should be given to the, that's where I would put, to legal and civil rights of all students, comma, the impact of policies on students, comma, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, so if I would move that legal and civil rights of all students, cut that where you've got it. Or Patty's doing that, all right, sorry. So I would cut that and then insert it. Should be given, yeah, this should be given to, right after the two, yeah, insert right to legal and civil rights of all students, comma, and et cetera, yeah. Because that's I think that's going to be the biggest determination of the guidance we give is what the courts are saying.
So are we removing constitutional rights from there and just consideration for what courts are saying, or is that?
Legal and civil rights is pretty expansive. That includes constitution, statutory law, case law, and consideration for the you could, if you want, legal and civil rights. Yeah, and then it's implied in that. Or you can say given constitutional, comma, legal, comma, and civil rights of all students.
I'd feel more comfortable with that.
Yeah, so sorry, so that would let's see, parents, students, and unschoolers. So I would put a period after officials. Yep, right there, period right there.
okay.
Yeah,
I like what we're doing with this, but I don't want to spend so much time putting periods and commas in if we can avoid it. If we can get close, I think we can ask staff just to clean it up for us afterwards, if that's okay.
Yep.
I wonder, looking at the paragraph we had originally at the top, so that USB first draft paragraph, are there parts of that that we might want to bring in? I think we're saying almost the same things that that paragraph says. We don't have the part that says questions are frequently asked about the rights of transgender, non-binary, and gender diverse students. We're more expansive than just pronouns, but would that be a good lead-in sentence for this?
I'm
Yeah.
not sure that you need it. I think this
Yeah.
guy, I'm not sure that we have to have that.
Okay,
I want to go back to Laura's point and just say that at the very end, I'm perseverating on this, consult with your own attorney. I don't think that's good guidance to be telling people to go out and consult with their own attorney. I think that offers litigation or suggests litigation.
Hmm.
I think we can do without the consult with your own attorney.
Because above it, it says, nor
Yeah.
is it intended to substitute for the advice of an attorney.
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah, somewhere in there, we've got to tell folks that this isn't the sentence, the last sentence in that first paragraph, that in the black, every student in school are unique. Building administrators should discuss these issues with students and families, draw on the experiences and colleague of expertise of their colleagues, as well as external resources. That's the attorneys, right? So somehow we need to say, you can't just take this and interpret it and decide what to do. If you have a situation that doesn't look like it fits, you need to be speaking with an attorney. So no substitute, it's not intended to be the substitute for the advice of an attorney. I guess if we have that in there, we're probably fine.
Yeah. Can we delete consult with your own attorney or obtain legal counseling?
Sure.
I'd like that deleted.
I do
Just-
like Scott adding that, but maybe it's okay. Because if we change it in a different order later, I'm not worried about it. I do like the black part brought back in, that every student. I like that there.
Okay, so just so we're clear on what we're doing, we've got this kind of inserted below USB first draft, and maybe we should pull this up and put it right at the top. The part that we've been working on, those two paragraphs, can we cut and paste those above? Or yeah, get rid of that or something so that we, but we don't want it to be labeled USB first draft as we do this.
Hanson, are you referring to the left side where it says USB first draft? You would like for that to be
Yeah,
disclaimer?
yeah. So, I mean, we're in the end, we're going to cut off all this reference material, and it's just here for convenience so that we can look at some of this other language and see. And I think if we do look down below, this is what all of these documents are saying. They're saying, hey, this is general guidance. This is basic direction. These are individual situations, and we need to apply these principles and then, apply them to the facts and talk to legal counsel if we need to.
At this point in time, do you want me to erase then all of the in between, or should I just go to the next one being backgrounds?
Yeah, why don't we just go to the next one now? And if we need to come back afterwards, you can just clean all that up. Okay, are we okay with this one then, committee? Yeah. Okay, speak up now or we'll move to background. Okay, we're on the background one. And any suggestions about how we lead into this? And we have a background paragraph here. I think that first sentence is a good one, personally. And then we talk about educational equity, which I think is also part of the background. So I would adopt or propose that we adopt that first paragraph all the way through. And then I guess my suggestion would stop right there.
Are you talking about starting with the Utah State Board of Education and ending with backgrounds?
Yep, ending with backgrounds and then see what other committee members would want to add to that. But I think that's a good backdrop for this. It says, hey, this is part of our work in educational equity.
Yeah, I like
I would,
that.
I would recommend those two previous paragraphs be added in here. And they may cover what, I had another paragraph from another research entity that I felt would be appropriate, that would address some of the things in the last paragraph, but it doesn't, it keeps it in a broader narrative.
Wait, Jenny, I just need clarity. Are you talking about this first paragraph again?
No, I'm talking about the two from that I asked to have removed from the disclaimer. That makes sense. So the knowledge of the factors contributing to gender identity, just a broad. So in other words, just saying kind of where we're at in this process in general. Does that make sense, Laura?
Going back up to the disclaimer. That's where I'm getting confused.
Yeah, yes, it's the two that I originally had there that I'm just asking maybe be included here in the background.
Okay, so you're taking what you had and you want, okay, sorry, Jenny, I was just trying to.
You're okay. Do you want me to read those again or?
We're not going back up to disclaimer. We're moving down to, okay.
Yes, the two
Board
paragraphs
member?
I initially had.
So Board Member Earl, if I go to your
Yes.
document where it said disclaimer, you're asking for the first two paragraphs under disclaimer to be put in with.
Yes, those two items to be put here. So it gives that idea that this is an ongoing research. Yes, and that it's maybe not fully understood by scientists and clinicians yet, but we're gathering additional information. And so anyways, yeah.
Okay.
And that.
I'm gonna, again, I guess, speak against the need to include this information. I think that we know we have transgender or gender nonconforming kids in our schools. We're not necessarily talking about treatments or the cause of what of the situation that these kids are in. We're just saying, hey, these kids are in our schools. How are we going to deal with the issues that present themselves? Because we have these transgender kids in our student populations, and legally, transgender is a protected class now. I mean, with the law that's come down from the employment cases, it's been included. Discrimination against transgender kids is being seen, and I think Brian should comment on this, being seen as the equivalent of sex discrimination. So I understand the intent, I think, of what's here is, hey, yeah, there's a lot going on, both legally and on the medical and treatment fronts. But I don't know that that's really germane to where we are with this document. I think that maybe creates more issues than it helps solve. Personally, that's how I feel. Brent, I saw your hand up. Sorry, didn't mean to talk over you.
Oh, no. My main concern here is, and I think this is for me, this is the most important part, because I want all students to be safe and to be accepted and to get the education that they're in school for. And my biggest concern is that word gender dysphoria. As I've looked through different definitions of that, there are lots of definitions of gender dysphoria, and I'm very uncomfortable with using that term because I don't know what the definition is. I like what we have already here.
Other committee members want to weigh in on this one? So I think what we're talking about is the paragraphs in black, and then whether about the addition of these paragraphs in red.
it might be helpful with this information to use this in somewhere in our definitions when we get there again, to review that.
So which way are you leaning, Laura, on this one? You want to work on the paragraphs in red? Do you think they're necessary, or?
Well, we already have the second one, and I think, but the information in the first red one, it may be something that we need to have in definition. What is gender dysphoria? What is transgender? What is, and have those in the definition piece rather than here.
Okay,
I guess my only concern with that is I think that goes past the scope of what we're trying to accomplish with this document in the first place, because we can take this all kinds of different directions. So that's my concern.
so you're saying not necessary then, Brent. Janet, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm thinking as I read the first one, it seems to me like a review of the literature around gender dysphoria, and I don't know that that's really our purpose. I think we need to just consider the needs of kids that are struggling in our schools rather than reviewing research on the topic.
I
Okay,
think the point here is that it's evolving, right? And that is the point of including something like this, is that it's not set, and that things are still moving, even among the authorities or those that do research and work in this area. There's not agreement, and I think that is an important feature for people to know.
but how does that affect the legal framework that we're dealing with, Jenny?
Well, I think it does affect it in that it's saying this is going to continue to move. These aren't set. I do think that is an important narrative.
Okay. Maybe this is a place where we need to have a motion and a vote to, whether to include or not. I don't know if anybody else wants to speak or how we want to break the deadlock that we're at right now. Do you want to just make a motion to include, Jenny, and then we can take a vote on that for
Sure,
this?
I'll make a motion we include. I think it's part of the background and almost like historical information or relevant information.
So we're voting on the two red paragraphs, whether to include those in the background information. And if we don't include those, well, let's just go that far and then we'll see if we're here. So committee members, the motion is to include these two paragraphs that you see in red. Please go ahead and vote. Brent and Laura, I don't see votes from you.
Chair, that's because I'm so struggling. I think there's some pieces of this that are have validity and could be in the background.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to give everybody a chance to speak before we push it to a vote. So we're at the point now where we've got to, decide where we're going and move forward. If you want to make some amendment or something, I mean, we don't want to get tied up in Robert's rules, but I want to make this so that we are dealing with the issues and moving forward. It looks like that we're Jenny Earl in favor and the other committee members opposed. So those would not be included in the background.
Chair Hansen, just because we've had dialogue here doesn't mean something couldn't be put forth at the next standards and assessment. Is that accurate?
Yeah, this is we're just
Okay.
trying to get the document together and we're going to see a draft then. This is a work meeting to get us something that we'll be voting on in the standards and assessment meeting. So, yeah.
Okay, so I'm just saying, that could be narrowly tailored down a little bit more to better.
For sure. Yeah. And I don't mean to be, to move through this too briskly, but we got a big job ahead of us and I'd like to get something that we can, flesh out and move forward. This third paragraph.
Can I make one quick question?
Sure.
So Jenny, this question's for you. the reason I feel so anxious about this is I did attend and I did listen to 3 times a presentation that was done by Erin.
Brewer.
And she stated in the document she sent to us, and this is in reference to gender dysphoria. It says, though students struggling with gender dysphoria need support and guidance, there is no such thing as a transgender child. Is that the definition that you're working off of? I want to be fair.
I don't even know what you're
No.
talking about, to be honest with you. So I have to apologize, Brent. I have not read through whatever document you're referring
It
to.
wasn't there, Brent.
Okay.
So
Oh, so Jenny, okay.
I listened to part of it, but I'm not even sure what you're referring to. But I do know there's legal definitions out there if that's what you're trying to, if
Okay,
you're,
well, I was just concerned because that's when I said there's many definitions out there for gender dysphoria. That was based on public input, because that public input was sent to all the board members as well as the recording, so. It is
right, I
in the
have not
document
had time to
you
go through that, so.
want. Okay. But do you have a thought on that?
Well, there's legal definitions out there, so if I'm not sure we can
Okay,
override
let's
what's
move
out there,
on.
so yeah, sorry, I'm a little confused, but
yeah, let's move on.
I'm gonna bring us back then to this 3rd paragraph and whether we want to adopt that as part of our background or not.
I'd like to not.
Okay, Laura says no. Help us. Why not?
Sorry.
Why not?
Okay, because then I say, okay, so we're taking this one definition and yet Jenny had another definition. We could have 20 definitions here. That's why.
Okay,
I do have maybe a recommendation. I don't know if Patty's got my document under background, that first paragraph that I'll read it, but it says something similar, but doesn't. Anyways, this is what it says. It says the rate of adolescents with gender nonconforming behavior and/or gender dysphoria seeking mental health care has dramatically increased over the past decade. Many of these youths also present with co-occurring psychiatric problems, including depression, anxiety, suicidality, substance use, and others. And that comes from a documented research item. So I don't know if that better fits, or maybe we just leave that out and just leave what we've got there currently. It's
I
one.
would vote in favor of removing that 3rd paragraph because I think the first 2 paragraphs are strong and they convey the message that I want to hear.
hey Janet, where are you on this one?
Oh,
I'm gonna call you out.
I don't know, Scott.
Okay. Yeah, let's read through this whole thing real quickly. Go to the top and let us see what we have. This is the background. Okay, we're making a guidance document about gender identity. And our first 2 paragraphs don't mention gender identity at all as far as background. I think we probably need to say something. I think the 2 paragraphs we have are basically saying the same thing. I would, if we looked at Jenny's verbiage, I'd be okay with all of it if we struck the and/or gender dysphoria and just said gender nonconforming behavior. Or I think the language below well, the language below adds a few things in there. Discrimination, prejudice, civil and human rights, family rejection, some other things that show up in a SHARP survey and some other documents. I really don't want this to be a war of the surveys because I think we can find surveys that say all kinds of things on every side of these issues. But can we somehow agree that the transgender, non-binary, gender diverse, gender non-conforming students are at a higher risk of negative outcomes? I mean, as a committee, do we? Sorry?
Yeah, I could say yes. What about putting that first instead of last?
I think it just needs to be simplified. Scott, we just said, I think we could probably have staff simplify it down to something similar to what you just said.
Okay.
To be first, I don't know, but I think just something along that lines that's more simplified.
Is that, as far as bullet points, I guess, from what Jenny proposed, I would just pull out the and/or gender dysphoria part. And then maybe from what's down below, there are some other negative outcomes that transgender kids are more prone to, more likely to experience. And I think we could highlight some of those going down below. Discrimination, prejudice, denial of civil and human rights. If we could maybe condense those items and include that with the statement that Jenny has above, can staff maybe help us with something like that?
I like what Patty was marking, that they are often at greater risk for negative outcomes due to perceptions of others regarding their gender identity, and just putting that up there.
Just pull that up. And
Yeah,
then what about placement? We want to lead off with this, or do we want this to be at the end? Brent suggested to lead off with it, and it is the topic of our guidance document, so we do that, then pull that to the top.
oh, aren't computers miracles?
Okay, we'll have staff clean that up for us, but I think that gives us, are we okay, everyone, with moving forward this direction?
You
I
know
think that's a
what?
good way to go.
Janet?
Okay, but I hate to put in the verbiage that says they had they're at greater risk for negative outcomes due to perceptions of others regarding their gender identity. Can we just say they're at greater risk of negative outcomes? And I just hate to layer that on others, you know.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
I think that gives us a reason to have the guidance document still, right? Whatever the cause is, this segment of our student population is at greater risk of negative outcomes. So,
and there could be all kinds of research, you know, that might attribute it to different things, but.
And Chair
Okay.
Hansen, you
Yes.
asked with staff that could kind of pull it together. I pulled a line up there, the key principle. That line comes from Virginia, and it's as part of there seems very similar to ours, but it had that in there, the key principle, like in their first paragraph, it had some of that thing. It just said, kind of regardless of everything, our key principle is that all children have a right to learn free from discrimination and harassment. And that kind of summed up all of those studies instead of listing them all out.
what do you think? We can't have policies in there, so we've got to take that out. What do you think, committee members? Is that a statement that we can make? Everybody has a right to learn free from discrimination, harassment.
I think we end up, maybe we could come back to that. I think that's good, but I actually think that there might be some other areas that we actually do end up identifying that in the document. So maybe we could just put an asterisk by that and maybe
Okay, yeah, put a highlight on it. And
if we don't end up addressing it somewhere else.
okay. Okay, let's, if we don't have any other comment here, no objections, we'll move to the next item.
Can I just clear on this one? So we have in here with everything, we have, Jeff, if you scroll down. Nope, up, sorry, scroll up. We have the first paragraph, the second paragraph as is, And then we have a highlight on the third red or an asterisk, and then we're still including that fourth paragraph is coming out.
No, that's what we wanted to, if staff can help us, there may be some items from that would be included in that paragraph that went to the top. But so we had different, I think, is that where we are? Are we just going to strike this, committee?
Yeah, I think you addressed it up at the top. That was the point,
Yeah, the only thing I saw was the negative outcomes or, various negative outcomes listed here that aren't in the top part. So do we want to include anything else? Or are we good with what's in that first paragraph? No comment. Okay. Any opinions on this blue highlighted area? I think
If we took what you said, they are often at greater risk for negative outcomes, and we pulled that to the top right after it says co-occurring psychiatric problems and just put it right there, or already in there. Sorry, Jeff already put it in there. They are often at greater risk. So we could pull that. It's already been pulled out.
sorry, Patty, I missed what you were saying.
Chair
Somehow
Hansen
I got,
mentioned pulling out, Jeff, if you could scroll up. And right there in black in the first paragraph in red, it says they are often at greater risk for negative outcomes. That's what was pulled out of the bottom that he was, that Chair Hansen was asking if it was.
right, okay, right. Sorry,
so. Then my only question was, do we want to include some of the negative outcomes that are enumerated in that remaining paragraph at the bottom, or have we covered it with what's here?
Well, I think it's a pretty profound list as you read through the things that are enumerated there. So I would like to include that.
So pull it from just include that in the negative outcomes. So,
Yeah, such as, yeah.
Okay.
I probably wouldn't include it, but Janet, sorry, I'm on a different page than you for a minute.
Okay. Brent, Jenny?
I wouldn't include it in either.
Okay, Brent.
I'm really mixed on this. I don't want to get too wordy, but at the same time, the part about inclusion and a feeling of belonging, and I mean, that's how it acts out in the classroom. So I kind of let that slide away. So I'm not certain. I mean, these are all things that, anyway, I don't know.
Okay. We're going to have a chance to look at this document next time, as Jenny mentioned. I will propose that we leave that in because it's easier to strike things than to come back and try to add them later. Would that be okay with keeping that in for right now? And then we'll have a chance to think through it and see if we want to condense that further.
Could we make it purple so we know that there was a discussion on it, that it wasn't red and added or black and kept?
Okay.
I'd like it green if that's okay.
Or green? Okay.
I'm kidding, it can go purple.
I love that. It's Christmas, here we come.
Red and green, here we go.
Give us a color that's going to print though. I printed on my black and white printer, so we may need
forest green.
Light green.
Forest green.
Okay.
Yeah, you got to get the right green, to have the flavor. There we go.
There we go. All right. Thank you. Okay. Background then we will leave. So that we'll strike what's down below and there we go. This key principle, we're going to leave that as well to think about. Okay. Next item. Okay. Moving on to age considerations. So, Brian, is there any help that we can get from the law on this? I mean, the basic premise is that, very young children will be certainly under parents' direct control and supervision. And then what we have in some of these other policies is older children are acting without their parents' knowledge. What's the law say on this?
Well, once they turn 18, they're no longer a minor. They become an adult, and thus they have the legal ability to make their own decisions. They can consent legally on their own. And so issues such as obtaining parental permission or parental consent are secondary, not as relevant as when the child is a minor. Overall, this seems to be kind of a smaller issue. And Holly can correct me, but I don't know if we really get a lot of these age questions. So I would recommend it goes more towards the bottom of this document, with the more important issues being at the top. But that being said, they're an adult at age 8, legally an adult at age 18. So I think that's the legal consideration to see.
And yes, where Brian's kind of choppy right now, I think, but could you hear what he said? So his suggestion was that we push this to the bottom of the document and deal with the other issues first, so that we know, I guess, what we're talking about when we're talking about whether age makes a difference. Because here it just is talking about accommodations, and we'll talk about lots of different accommodations. The only thing that's clear in the law is that age 18 is the kids have the right to their educational records, and they can act more or less on their own. But other than that, nothing clear legally.
That's right.
Are we okay
Well,
with taking this one? Can we take
have
it at the end? Is that okay? Jenny, go ahead.
Yeah, we can have it at the end. I just do think it is an important item, this idea that, or at least I didn't find anywhere in the law that it said, it's really not okay to involve parents in the education of their child. As a matter of fact, I found it everywhere on almost every circumstance, from clinicals that the kids take to sports to, clubs, that you have to get a parent consent. So I maybe I missed it, but I couldn't find anywhere that minor children were not to have, parent involvement there. So
Yeah, I'm thinking
that we can address that, but I couldn't find it. Maybe Brian, you've got something that I can't find.
No, but I wonder if we're talking about two different things. I would focus on the age 18. But I think what you're saying on is many of these issues are age dependent. Are we talking about a second grader, or are we talking about a 12th grader, and the age of the child, which I think is appropriate. I agree with that.
Yeah, or an 8th grader,
Mhm.
where do they?
I think that issue is going to become much more clear as we talk about the specific things that we're, issues that we're dealing with, that we've broken out. I'd
Perfect.
like to do what Brian said and just push this one to the end. We'll make sure we get back to it and see what we need to do to finish things out. But, there may, as Jenny said, be a non-issue. I mean, if they're not 18, then they're a child. And so if the committee's okay, we'll do that. Just move to the next one, the facilities issue.
Can I? Oh, okay. You're skipping age altogether. Is that what you're saying? The age?
Skip it for right now, and then we'll see.
Okay,
Any of
got
these
you.
things we talk about if age makes a difference. And, if age makes a difference, we'll have a longer discussion. If not, then our discussion will be pretty short when we get to age. So facilities, Brian, help us understand. This is one area where the law, there's quite a bit of case law.
Yes, and I've turned off my my camera here because I'm having some connectivity issues. So yeah, facilities, there is quite a bit of case law, federal case law on this. And essentially, a majority of courts have held that a student is entitled to use restroom facilities that align with their gender identity. That's just the simple and briefest statement I can make of it. I do recognize there are a few cases that are courts that are in the minority. And when I just give you a little more detail here. So you've got Title VII, which relates to employment law. Title IX relates to education law.
So the Supreme Court has given us a decision in the Title VII world. And so a majority of courts have said, based on the Title VII decision, here's how Title IX should be interpreted. And so that's what I'm saying. So bottom line is quite simply that they can use facilities that align with the gender that they identify as.
So Brian, some of the language that we see in a lot of these policies where it says, the gender they identify with, and it's a sincerely held gender identity. Is there some
Yes.
sort of a test that school administrators should apply to see if something is sincerely held, or what are the
Yes.
factors?
Yes and no. So the phrase is gender identity is sincerely held, which is somewhat wide open. If we add in factors, make it a factor test or other kind of criteria, it might kind of weigh this down and complicate this a little bit. And I'm not sure that's the intent. If you want to give schools a little more flexibility, then you just give them the phrase and they would then interpret what that means, a gender identity that is sincerely held. But to the extent you start adding in tests, then I would think courts might look at that, and it is kind of like a poll tax where the effect is that it discourages application and could cut against a student. But to answer your question, I looked briefly at that. I didn't find that. No, I know. I beg your pardon. In Utah, in housing discrimination, our Supreme Court, I think it might have been last year, did provide some tests, but that was in the housing context, and it's not necessarily in our context that we're dealing with.
Well, yeah, okay. I guess we can, at some point it's going to be subjective, right?
Yeah, so you got
We
to
say
decide.
sincerely held, and then we let administrators deal with that. And if they continue to have, or if they have issues and we get further questions, and maybe we go back into that and try and define it more.
That would be my recommendation.
So can you help us understand how this would play out? So we have a student who tells or comes out to the school or tells the school that they're transgender, and that they want to go from male to female. So they want to use the female restroom. They're comfortable doing that. So that's the restroom that should be made available to them, right? According to the law.
Yes.
And so then if other students have issues with that, privacy issues or other kinds of issues, and how's that dealt with?
So schools should be encouraged to discuss with all parties involved and try and kind of work out, and not just have a hard and fast black letter, here's the way it's going to be, take it or leave it, but instead kind of communicate and consider, try and consider everyone's kind of perspective and concerns. But at the end of the day, a school cannot deny the transgender student the bathroom that they identify with. That we've seen that happen, and courts will rule against that. There's kind of the well-known Gavin Grimm case that came out of the Fourth Circuit School District in Virginia. Essentially said, no, we're not going to accommodate Gavin, and it went up to the Supreme Court and down and up and down, and Virginia ended up paying Gavin $1.3 million in legal fees. So the moral of the story is, at the end of the day, you've really got to accommodate the student.
Okay, so so the transgender student should not be, I'm reading from the Hawaii document, I think it was in all of them, can't be compelled to use an alternative restroom or a single stall restroom. They need to be, according to the case law, given their option to use the restroom of the sex that they identify with. And then how does practically, how does this school broadcast to the other students that they, if they're not comfortable, they can use another restroom? Does the other students need to raise that issue and say, hey, I'm not comfortable? Or does the school need to somehow put out a notice that says, hey, if you're not comfortable with the restroom situation, then here are your alternatives.
No, those are all great questions. I know that Holly's had a little more experience in actual kind of in the trenches questions from LEAs on these issues. So she may have a little more actual experience on those kind of details that you've just asked about.
Mhm.
I don't have a legal answer as far as how the school would or should communicate with other students that aren't comfortable with using the same bathroom.
Chair Hansen,
Yeah,
again, I apologize that I can't raise my hand. Hawaii has what Jeff is showing right now, examples that have these. When we
yeah,
do Illinois, they have it identified as kind of like questions and then answers that go, but the question and answers are very similar when you go state to state that have been identified on this document. So Holly, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to direct your attention to those.
Nice, Patty. I like that.
yeah. If, Holly, before you speak to us, I think that you're queued up. I don't see hands over here, but I hope that you can help us with the practical application. My real question is, if the law is clear here and this is what we need to do, then how do we let the policy or the school's policy on the way to handle this be known to students so that they can seek an accommodation if they want one? How is that playing out in our schools now?
Would you like me to respond?
Yes, please.
So it's usually case by case, and typically a parent who disagrees with the school's decision to allow a student to use, a transgender student or non-binary student to use the restroom of that aligns with their gender identity. Typically a parent will call in, or perhaps more than one, and express their concern about it, and they'll handle it on a case-by-case basis. They'll work with the parent, the student, the transgender student, their parents or guardians, and then the others to resolve the situation. But if they will, most likely, as far as notification, they should have it written into a policy. So there's really no need, that is the broadcasting. That is stating, this is how what our policy is in the use of facilities in our school or in our district, and then they can make arrangements for the other students if there is a conflict in their minds with going with that policy.
Okay, so maybe that's something that should be in our guidance document. It's something that says that districts should have a written policy. Because as I just did a quick search through our LEAs, there aren't a lot of policies dealing specifically with these issues right now. So maybe the guidance document prompts the districts to have a policy, and that becomes the way to communicate with parents. Jenny, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear there. When you refer to a law, there's not really a law, nor is there legal law, but what there is interpretation at the courts, through the courts, and also policy, right? Which is different than law itself.
No, there's cases. Cases are law. There's quite a few cases.
But as far as a federal law, there's not a federal law.
We've got Title IX, which says you can't discriminate on the basis in education on the basis, and there's your protected classes, and then courts have interpreted that. So law can come from cases and statutes and rules.
Right.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, so, and I know, yeah.
Statute being different than the way the courts have interpreted Constitution, Title IX, these other things, but case law is still, there's controlling case law, and I don't know if there's anything in our 10th Circuit directly on point here, Brian. There is Supreme Court case law now with this Gavin Grimm case, where it went up to the Supreme Court and it was left to stand the way that it came out. So that one would be controlling, I believe. Is that right, Brian?
Yes. The Supreme Court basically sent it back to the Fourth Circuit and didn't change anything. And so the Fourth Circuit decision stood and kind of silences acceptance. And so, yeah, and that's how it's interpreted. Essentially that the Supreme Court affirmed the Fourth Circuit. So that's
so
correct.
We have no we're not asking for any criteria. We're not asking for anything like that. We're just,
What do you mean criteria?
well, when I say criteria, like a student would have some indication from their physician or some indication from a therapist or something that they're going through they're transitioning or something. Nothing like that. We're just
No, yeah.
as long as you
it's-
fill it, we're gonna.
Gender identity as sincerely held belief, but yeah, when you start.
Well, that's
Prove
what
it.
that's what the court said.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what Hawaii wants.
yeah. Yeah, when you start adding in, prove it, show your evidence that you really, really mean it, then that looks discriminatory according to courts.
So it's the wording, and maybe we can ask Brian to help us with that as homework, is, this gender identity, I think the courts have defined, and maybe we need the quotes, that it's a sincerely held belief, a sincerely held gender identity, and then that is the gender identity that we have to honor in the schools.
I will look into that a little more deeply and just confirm Member Earl.
So Chair Hansen, how does that collide with our constitution in the state, that it's a parental right state? So if a child states that, where do we go in a school? What kind of guidance can we give our schools on that?
So I think we're jumping ahead. We try to take facilities early because that's supposed to be an easy one, but we're getting to, what is this sincerely held belief or sincerely held gender identity? And I think we've got to get to the one down here that says, parental participation. And this comes up on every one of these. So, where's the best place to handle it? It really is. So a child comes to a teacher and says, hey, I want to be known. I've been known as a male. I want to be known as a female from here on out. Please call me by she, her pronouns. Then what's the process that we need to go through? And when does that become a sincerely held gender identity? Do you have any help for us, Brian?
That's where I would think you would need some criteria of some kind and from someone licensed to make that judgment.
Yeah, and I looked at the other 6 state guidance documents, and only 2 of them even mention that phrase sincerely held. But there's no criteria that are referenced in those 6 state guidance documents. And so what I'm saying is there's not a whole lot of kind of requirements or tests that have to be satisfied in order for it to kind of pass and be certified as now a different gender identity. So
We have criteria in our athletics though.
Yeah, the UHSA definitely has some scientific criteria that
Because it's not just a deeply held belief there. So I'm just wondering, what would the difference be between, right? Because here there's just a declaration.
Yeah.
Couldn't that be the same with sports then too?
Well, and not according to UHSAA. They're taking a little more scientific view and requiring certain kinds of, different more evidence that there's hormonal levels that are considered. But I think the context of sports is different than using a bathroom.
Yeah, I think that as well. I think that the sports is trying to maintain a competitive balance, where here that's really not the consideration, at least that the courts have had. Not sure how we move forward here. I think we've heard from our AAG, where the law is on this. Our guidance should be in alignment with the law. Is there anything that we need to? How do we do this? How do we express this? Jenny, your hand's up. I don't know if you've got another comment. What do you say?
I just think that to say one individual's concerns or their constitutional right trumps someone else's constitutional right to privacy. It's hard to, how do we define that? How do we, dice that out and say your constitutional right to certain privacy is not the same as this child's certain right to constitutional privacy? I'm just trying to understand how we justify that. And I understand there's precedents out there, but it's hard to say. And then if so, then there has to be a very clear statement that parents in that community are aware. And, or if you're saying case by case, but really you're not saying case by case, you're saying this is a done deal. You really don't have a choice in it. Individuals could choose where they go to the bathroom, but a district doesn't have a choice. Is that an accurate statement?
And Brian's our legal expert. I'll answer from what I understand, I guess. So if a student expresses a desire to, says that they are identifying as a gender that's different than their biological gender, and then continues with that and expresses an accommodation to go to the restroom of the gender they identify with, then the schools are obligated, I believe, under law to allow them to do that. Then if other students have a problem with that, if they feel that that violates their privacy rights, then they are able to request an accommodation to use another restroom, a single stall restroom or something like that. The law is pretty clear that we can't, if a transgender child comes forward and says, hey, I don't want to go to the restroom of a biological sex, we can't tell them they have to use the single stall restroom. That's sex discrimination, is what the courts have said. But if the child can't bounce back and forth between the girls and the boys' bathroom, and that's how you'd know that something isn't sincerely held. So they have to make a choice and go with it. But that's how I believe it plays out. Am I wrong, Brian, with my
No, I think you summarized that nicely. I was just going to add that there is somewhat competing rights here, the right to be discriminated against versus the right for privacy. And the courts are essentially saying that the right to not be discriminated against is elevated a little bit above the right to privacy, and schools should accommodate any student that doesn't feel comfortable using the bathroom with a transgender kid by giving them the nurse's bathroom or some other single-use bathroom to accommodate that privacy concern.
So I would add wording in this that it's easily accessible. I would add that because it's been the case I've seen in a number of, not in Utah, but in along the East Coast, where open bathrooms, but then if you want a single sex bathroom that aligns with biological sex, it's at the end of the hall on the third floor. Usually these are universities that put it, so that they're not really accommodating. So I would definitely encourage that if this is the language that's going to be used, that the accommodations are easily accessible.
I think that, reasonable access is the word they're using. This is a hard one because we have existing schools and they don't have a lot of leeway to, change their bathroom layouts. And sometimes that, the single stall restroom is by the nurse's station, or, a faculty use one that's just a single door, single stall. So we've got to come up with some language here. I think we're starting to understand where we are, but we got to come up with some language. Laura, please go ahead. You've patiently had your hand up. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think we're on the exact path, because some of these other definitions are about the rights of the students, which I believe we have to look after them. We have to see what they are in need of. However, in our state, we're a parental rights state. So if a student comes and says, I want to use this restroom, where does the parental rights step in here and say, where do we balance that? And again, that may go back to our age appropriate, but I still think that holds true for any one of our students in our school.
So the discussion, sorry, and I'll go back to you. The discussion, I think, on that is what triggers the notification of parents. If a child requests an accommodation to use a restroom that doesn't align with their biological sex, then do the parents get notified? If the child says, that they want to be known by pronouns other than the ones that align with their biological sex, then is the parent notified? And then, what is the parent able to do from that point on? I think you're saying, so if the child says, I want to go to the boys' bathroom and they're biologically a girl, then can the parents say, no, we're not going to do that? That, the child should still go to the bathroom that aligns with their biological sex. Is that the question, Laura?
Well, mine is so much bigger than that, but that is the surface question.
So it's what triggers the parental notification, and then what direction do we take from parents, versus the child, right?
Yeah, and what triggers, and so, trying to be conscious and aware and trying to support all these students. When do we allow that to happen? And do we, as a guiding document, tell LEAs they have to have something without some additional guidance of the parental involvement?
So parental involvement's on our list. I've got to see where we come into it. Records, privacy, confidentiality, parental involvement. So it's there. And I think the discussion we need to have somewhere in here is, when is a parent notified? What triggers parental notification? Are there cases when a parent shouldn't be notified? And who does that? Those sort of discussions. How can we do this without tackling that one? Or do we need to move to that one before we can talk about the restroom issue?
I just want to have it open that we have got to do something with that in this area.
We have it listed out, and I think it's accommodations in general, right? When a child requests some accommodation, which I read accommodations to be a treatment or a concession, I don't want to say, from the school that doesn't align with their biological sex or their existing school records, then there's, at some point, we need to decide what that is for our guidance document. Then that needs to trigger some notifications. Now, parents could request an accommodation, I guess. I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be the student that says that they want to use the restroom. We could have parents say, hey, my child is a transgender child, and even though the biological sex is female, he should be in a male restroom. It doesn't have to be the student initiating this. Brent, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think this needs a business case. We need to improve the ability to have privacy in our bathrooms.
Agreed.
I've thought that for a long time because, I can't tell you, when I graduated from Utah State, when you went to a football game there, their setup was absolutely horrible. There was no privacy, but I think that's been improved, thank heavens. But we have wide gaps in stalls. We have just open urinals. We have all this stuff. And I agree, all students need their privacy, regardless of whether they're transgender, homosexual, whatever, heterosexual. We all need more privacy. And so I think we're straining at gnats and swallowing camels here, is my thought.
Well, in future, as we build schools, I think the direction is probably going to be to more single stall type restroom setups. But we don't have that right now. Some of our buildings are very old. Some of them still have the Utah State type, communal urinals and that sort of thing. So we've got to do the best we can under the law with the facilities we have, and then move forward.
Right.
Yeah, Brian, please.
Chair, kind of circling back to the question, this parental notification issue does permeate a number of these issues. In my opinion, it's the thorniest, kind of trickiest, hardest question that this committee's going to grapple with. There might, so he just going to decide, you want to go after some more lower hanging fruit before you get this one, or do you want to just jump on this one and go after this high hanging fruit and try and get it done?
Yeah, well, I'm just coming to the conclusion that maybe we can't tackle any of these other ones until we do the parental notification. It sounds like it will come up on, each one of them. So should we dive into that?
And then for consistency's sake,
Mhm.
I noted in green that what happens when a student or parent requests an accommodation, and then the parental notification. That's what we did in the last one, to go back. And so it's noted there.
Okay, can we, from the discussion that we've had, can we lay down any bullet points that we have staff flesh out for us on restroom and locker room facilities? Is anyone ready to do that?
Parents need to be notified about any policy. I don't know if we're back in the parent thing, but I think the public has a right to know what the policy is.
Okay,
It should be very public. It shouldn't be.
okay, so some bullet points about, we had a note about policy. It needs to be a public policy. And then I guess I don't see that we have a lot of leeway on this one from what we've heard from Brian and seen from the law that's out there. I think we could have the bullet points that say that a transgender student should be able to use the restroom that they select. So it could be the sex that they identify with, or a private restroom, or whatever we want to call a gender neutral restroom. But they can't be held.
Keep saying transgender. What about our non-binary students here as well?
Well, we're dealing with gender non-conforming students. So, if they, if you're talking about homosexual students, then?
No, non-binary. So
Mhm.
they don't identify with either. And yet they're still in our schools. And so we keep saying when a transgender, I'm just saying we're limited to that to LGBT and nothing else in there.
I don't know if there's any case law on that. I don't think that there is that I've seen. Brian, do you know what happens there?
No, I'm not aware, but I think essentially the non-binary student has to select which bathroom they want to use, or some kind of like nurse's bathroom. So at some point they have to pick.
But yeah, non-binary, I don't think has gone up through the courts.
That's right. Yeah.
That I've seen. So, I mean, that's probably one of the areas where, and Holly, you're going to help us out of this, aren't you?
Well, I
ahead.
don't know that I can help you out of it, but I have had this situation come up relatively recently. And I think it's going to be hard to draw a hard line one way or the other, but with this particular situation, they met at the district and they talked through, okay, so where is your child going to the bathroom most frequently? And so the child was going to one particular restroom most frequently, even identifying as non-binary. So they came to a decision to allow the student. I think that the gender identity was different than sex assigned at birth, and so since that child had been consistently wanting to use that restroom, they said, okay, so how about, for right now, this is what we'll stick with, using this particular restroom, and then we'll meet again and see how it's going, see how, in a few months, and assess where we're at that point. So I don't know that you can really come to a hard line. It's going to be one of those case by case, I think, at this point, because like Brian said, we don't have case law, but it is coming up. Just as Board Member Belknap said, it is coming up.
Well, and there will be, gender fluid students, and then, what do we do, with all these? Okay, I think that is a case by case, but go ahead, Jenny.
Well, once again, and that, so there is that privacy thing. So I think you need to be clear that any parent can make a privacy/safety accommodation, whether that's for religious reasons, whether that's for safety reasons, whatever that is, because a variety of children have had unsafe interactions, whether those were abusive interactions or whatever they are, where they may feel uncomfortable. And so I guess what I'm saying is that there needs to be a clear understanding that any child could make a bathroom, ask for a bathroom accommodation. And I know we're saying, well, it's broad, it's open. Well, I think it needs to be clear that that parent could go in and request that specifically, or the child, if that's the way we're handling it.
Any child can request an accommodation. I don't know, Laura, how to handle when we start broadening this out further and further. We've kind of started down the road of dealing with transgender because that's the one that's been hitting us now. The other issues will come, but I don't know if this becomes unwieldy or not. You know, can we handle all those situations?
We cannot, because we don't even know all of them that are coming. So I just wanted you to be aware of my thoughts on that. Okay.
I appreciate that. And thanks for bringing me into that. Okay. So we need another bullet point about, there it is. Policy should be public available and any parent or student may request accommodations.
So when you're saying policy there, you mean an LEA policy?
Yeah, maybe we should say that, LEA policy.
Because this document is not a policy.
No.
Yeah, okay.
And then just ask staff to help us with the wording that basically lays out the way the law is now, that transgender student can select the gender that for the sex that they identify with, or a private or single stall restroom. And that they can't be compelled to use the alternative restroom. And then I think that statement about any parent or student may request restroom or locker room accommodations. I mean, locker room's the next one. Is locker room any different than restroom for anyone? Are there any other considerations there? Or is it the same thing?
It's the same thing.
Okay, so this will be all the bathroom, locker room facilities.
Yeah. There, you may need to include something about showering in a locker room. And have affording privacy.
Is that the same single stall kind of thing, Janet, that you're talking about?
Gosh, I remember reading in some of those, they talked about locker room privacy, and I just thought, they need to provide privacy within a locker room as they would within a restroom.
Okay.
I think also under the not compelled to use a single stall, I think we also need to say not compelled to use the full locker room too, because if you have someone who, for whatever reason, does not want to change maybe their biological sex is female and they don't want to use the female locker room, I don't think they should be compelled to, and they should be able to have, once again, we've got the accommodation, so there shouldn't be a compelled to have to use that if they're uncomfortable for some reason, or, for whatever privacy reasons.
I'm not following, Jenny. So what?
Well, I'm just saying, in a school, you may have kids that, for religious reasons or whatever, don't feel like they want to change in an open facility. So, but there may not be an easily accessible place for them to change. And so that's what I'm saying. They need to be given, they shouldn't have a compelled, you have to use this.
So isn't that covered by the any parent can request accommodations?
Yeah. If you go to page 9, F3, it gives that example.
Yeah, I think we covered that when we said that any parent can or student can request accommodations, and that would mean they could go from the open locker room to a private locker room, or a private changing facility. If we have lots of requests for accommodations, our schools are going to have to stagger times or do something to make all that work. But I think that's the way the law is right now anyway.
Maybe we could relook at how we do PE. So that's a whole nother thing later.
Yeah. Well, we talk about physical education down here below. All right.
Chair Hansen,
Yes.
as direction to staff as we flesh these, similar to what Board Member Straight just talked about. Jeff, if you could scroll down to F3, there's 2 different ways states did this, and we're wondering, when we flesh this out as requested in the beginning of this meeting, if it means to do examples like in Hawaii, or if we scroll down even more, Jeff, and it goes to Illinois, or let me see, I think Illinois is next. Yep. And then if you scroll down to F3, which is what Board Member Straight was talking about, there we go. Or is it something similar to this, or less is more and it's just a sentence? What is the expectation from staff as we move these questions and examples forward?
What do we think, committee members? Do we want
I'd say less is more. That's my.
do we want examples or no?
No.
So when we did our other equity training, the superintendents and those who were looking at it said they wanted examples because they needed to have those examples provide more guidance than a whole bunch of words. And so I do agree that less is more most times, but when it comes to examples, more examples help guide the policy more than a lot of other words.
Since this is a guidance policy, I think examples are very helpful to those who will be looking over the policy.
I like the examples as well. The Hawaii ones were very concise. The Illinois ones, I think, are too much. But if we had something like that, and in this area, I don't know there's that much difference between any of the policies as far as what the actual, guidance is. But I would like the Hawaii-like examples, concise examples. Can we include those on a 3-2 split? Is that okay?
Yeah, I'm fine with shorter examples that are clear and concise.
Okay. Jenny.
If we're going to put some of those examples, we also need some that would be for students who are heterosexual and what their rights would be in there, or religious rights as well.
Yeah. So as a student who is gender conforming and isn't comfortable with the bathroom situation, what can they do? I agree.
I like that too.
Yep.
And I would also include something with someone with a safety that's maybe had abuse in the past or something.
And ultimately, it's about all students, and all students are safe, and we accommodate everyone, and yeah, so I agree with that.
Okay. We okay to let staff help us with this one and move on to the next one?
Yes, but Chair, I just want to make sure that we're not doing a comparison that these students are choosing this because there is a non-binary student in there. I don't want to do comparison, or I'm making this choice because of that.
What, help me, I don't understand.
That students in a locker room may choose to dress in a private stall because of religious reasons, not because there is a transgender student in there.
Sure, I think I mean, it says any parent or student may request accommodations regarding bathroom facility use. I think that's bathroom, locker room, facility use. So I don't think that would even tie it down to any reason. I mean, they could just say they're not comfortable. I mean, it could be a really minimal trigger. They just need to ask for it.
I just, for consideration, Chair Hansen, I pulled over Board Member Earl's language from her document that's, that just is trying to get an idea in creating what that looks like with that kind of wording. And so I'm just pulling this over so that we can, like a sentence starter as we work through these.
Yeah, I think that we covered it. Personally, I think that when we say any parent or any student may request accommodations regarding bathroom facility, if we just add bathroom or locker room facility use, I think we've covered all of those. They don't have to have a reason. They just need to request the accommodation. And I think that that's the way the law is anyway. I mean, if someone has a problem with the transgender student being there, they can request it. If there's a religious reason, they can request it. If they just are shy, this would allow them to request, a accommodation. Does that cover? Okay. Let's go ahead then to the next one, which is the determination of gender identity. And I think we talked about this one a little bit already, but let's move to it.
What are you asking for on this? Are you asking for a definition?
Yeah, so I think the reason it was included is, what triggers these accommodations? Well, I think some of this was some of the items that you raised, Jenny, about, do we need medical, some kind of a medical certificate, or can a child request, or does a parent need to trigger that? And let me see if I can get to that. And the wording is this sincerely held gender identity.
Well,
needs to be
that's
accepted.
correct me if I'm wrong, that's some people's wording, right? I mean, that's not, I don't know that that's in Utah law anywhere. Once again, that's how some people have chosen to word it.
Okay, ask
Oh.
Brian, can you
No.
help us with that? I think that's from case law, but Brian needs to tell us about that.
That's right. That comes from cases, Courts have coined that phrase.
Brian, we're unable
Yeah.
to hear you. Can
Yeah.
you my phone and then I'll put it on speaker so they can hear you better?
Calling on phone?
Oh, wait, I can hear you better now.
Can you? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yes.
you're
so
good.
Okay, I agree. Judges in courts and cases have coined that phrase. Can you hear me, Patty?
Yes, you're kind of going in and out.
Let me try on all right, I'll try my cell phone.
Okay.
He said court cases have coined that phrase.
Right, that's right.
Okay, so this one is not clear cut as far as what triggers this. If a student just tells a teacher that in their class they want to be referred to by gender or pronouns that don't agree with their biological sex, then is that sincerely held gender identity, or do they need to be known that way in all of their classes, in the, initiate a change with the school? There's some examples in the Hawaii document that talks about, consistently and more openly in the school, being dressed as, female, male dressed as female, or and also known by female pronouns. There's some different examples there, but when does the school need to accommodate, or when does a child have a non-binary gender identity? What triggers that is the question here.
And once again, I would recommend there was something more substantial. Just so that it gives clarity, I think, for educators as well as schools themselves. So anyways, I have recommended language, but however you want to proceed. A student desiring to be treated as transgender must present a signed physician's or licensed therapist statement that confirms that the student is presently undergoing gender transition. That puts it in the hand of licensed professionals, and anyways, it gives some clarity to exactly what that looks like instead of this broad decision.
So Jenny, could parents come in without a doctor's certificate and say that my child is, a transgender child?
Once again, I either that, or you've got, it could be anything, right? Could be non-binary, could be, I don't know. I guess that's the question. Are we asking just whatever? Are we asking that there's some kind of criteria so that we can, act on that?
Read some of these model or example policies are really, if the student asks for it, then the school should honor that request. Virginia has an interesting definition that's a little bit more thoughtful. Maybe we can just read through that and see kind of where this is. And then certainly like to hear comments about what Jenny suggested too, but on Virginia, students considered transgender if at school the student consistently asserts a gender identity different from their sex assigned at birth. This should involve more than a casual declaration of gender identity, but does not necessarily require any evidence or a required minimum duration. Establishing gender identity can present differently from student to student. Uniform assertion of such an identity, indication the identity is sincerely held as part of their core identity, or that the student is not asserting an identity for an improper purpose. So that's kind of the way that they're doing it. I think that one was the most comprehensive about how, you would determine whether it was a sincerely held belief. But what do other committee members think about this? Because I don't know that a medical certificate is necessarily the step that starts a change in gender identity. I think that, that if you read through these, there's a social change that sometimes is followed by a medical type change, but I'm not sure that would hold up, and I don't know. Brian, do you have any comments on that? Did we lose him? Any other committee members on this one?
Well,
Chair, can you hear me?
it seems like a real case by case basis. And it's a hard call. I'll let Brian talk. He's not echoing.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, now he's echoing.
You. Okay. I was just gonna say that phrase improper purpose. That comes from courts. That's verbiage that comes out of cases. And the idea there is schools have maximum flexibility to determine based on their conversation with the student if there's an improper purpose being used by the student. But there's no criteria, there's no tests, there's no requirements. It's just a very kind of flexible phrase, improper purpose. Over.
So Brian, are there any legal
Can you hear me?
issues? Sorry, are there any legal issues with requiring some sort of a certificate or a diagnosis or treatment? The other states that we've seen here kind of make a point that that's not required. And is that for legal reasons?
Chair, can you say that one more time?
So Jenny's has the suggestion that we require some sort of a documentation before we would consider a transgender child's new gender identity, a gender identity different than what they were assigned at birth. And I'm wondering if there are any legal problems with doing that, because some of these other policies made a point that said that that's not required. And I don't know if that's for legal reasons or if that's just, something that they put in for other reasons.
Yeah, I have not seen that in the
Chair Hansen, I just put in Board Member Earl's wording
Mhm.
in red.
There's also wording, I'm looking at UHSAA's handbook that may even be broader, but it says written verification from an appropriate healthcare professional, and it lists doctor or psychiatrist or psychologist of the student's consistent gender identification and expression.
Mhm.
So that one it's similar. Their wording is just a little bit different.
That's in UH.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm reading right out of their handbook.
Okay.
That's one of they have other criteria too, but it would seem that,
So
verification.
So then could parents fill that out, or is that under that definition, does it have to be a licensed professional?
Yeah, from a healthcare professional is what it says.
Chair.
Yeah.
I would add, here's maybe a different way to look at it. Do we require, what's the phrase? All students to have some kind of documentation to use for their choice? And the answer is, of course, no. And so by requiring these the gender identity students provide that documentation when the other students don't have to provide it, to me that reflects some discrimination, and I think we're going to run into some trouble there. Number two, I've not seen courts requiring documentation to use bathrooms or facilities. Not sports, I'm talking about bathrooms and facilities.
Okay, I want to make sure we're on solid legal ground here if we're going to issue a guidance document. I'm not really clear on this one. I didn't see any of the example ones, but I don't know, but again, that may be for other reasons other than court, but you're saying that might be seen as separate treatment if we require documentation of transgender kids and we don't require it from others. I don't.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we do have documentation from all children.
Yeah, we have a birth certificate.
Yeah, well, they come in and yeah, I'm just saying there is documentation when they enter school. So
Is that one that we need to ask Brian to do a little bit more research on and see? If,
Yeah, let me do that. I'm looking now to see if I can find it real quickly.
okay,
But don't wait for me. If I find something, I'll chime in.
yeah. How much more can we do on this one? We have, I guess the two suggestions would be something like what's in the Virginia one, and then the one that's pulled from the High School Athletic Association. So written verification from an appropriate healthcare professional. So, and that's already in their policy if a student wants to participate in high school athletics who's transgender. Right, Jenny?
That is accurate.
Okay. Holly, please.
Yes, I just wanted to kind of let you know that not all trans individuals will go through a sort of a physical transition ever in their lifetimes. That's a choice for them and their bodies, whether or not they identify as transgender, but whether or not they go through that physical transition, especially before they hit adulthood, they might not start going through any sort of medical procedures to transition.
So in that, I guess that's, I see these requirements being written more broad than just a medical, or it could be a therapist or someone else that could sign off on that. But yeah, that's the question, I guess. Someone else was speaking, sorry.
That was me, Chair. No, you clarified it.
Okay.
Well, it seems to me like we're back to, we need to know if in Utah we can require something like this from the parents, or if we need to be more open like some of these others. So it goes back to the parental notification and parental rights. And I think we really need to have a good foundation with where we are on those issues.
Thanks, Janet. But what if we leave this with kind of two competing ways to establish gender identity, one being the Virginia approach and the other being written verification from, and Jenny, would you be okay if we added a parent? From a parent or an appropriate healthcare professional?
Ponder that. So
I'm thinking about parents' rights on both sides of this issue.
well, I would agree with that. I think there is that need for respect for that. So yeah, I think you could put it in for now and I'll ponder that. So yeah.
So what if we ask our AAG to weigh in on that, if not tonight, before our next meeting, and help us to understand whether we're in, I don't think there are legal problems with the Virginia definition, because that seems to be the more generally, that's in more of the policies. The other one is, I'm not seeing any other examples of it, but I can see how it fits. It's in the high school athletics policy. So maybe we can look at that and see if that's something we can adopt. Is that okay if we leave that one right there?
That
Not,
works for me.
not hearing any objections. We're going to move to dress code. And I know that you had something on this, Jenny, and it kind of matches up with some of the example ones too, I think. Do you want to put that out for us, or?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just got a text I was reading. I apologize.
Uh,
Tried to avoid that. Would you tell me where specifically you're looking at?
So,
Read
yep.
that?
we're on dress code now, and I
Oh,
think,
yeah.
I think that you had something on that I thought was pretty similar to some of these other policies as well.
I just think it needs to be simple, but yes, let me find it. Oh, where can I find it? Maybe Patty's got it.
I'll put it in right above Hawaii.
Okay, thank you. Why am I can't find it on my one document, so, which I know it's there. I just think it needs to be simple.
I see it on yours, so.
Okay. Do you want to read it then, Scott? For some reason, I can't find where it's located.
Patty's got it up now.
Okay.
So gender neutral option for uniforms, and dress codes, uniform policies, modesty and cleanliness, eliminating distractions or attention seeking behavior. So that was a simple approach to it. I think we can look at some of the state's guidance documents. Hawaii says same, gender neutral. Students can be permitted to wear the clothing of their choice, but it can't violate the dress code. And it should be applied evenly to all students.
I just think the simpler you go, I think there's a variety of students that would fit into a category of different kind of dress culturally, or, could be, a variety of things. I just think as long as it's not a distraction from the classroom.
So under your suggestion, Jenny, if a biological male comes to school in a dress, and it meets the modesty requirements and all that, then that's okay. Is that right?
I don't know what you do. What are you suggesting?
No, I'm just throwing out, possibilities to see how it would work with the dress code to see. I mean, we need to test it a little bit before we put it in as guidance, and what are the different, so we could have a biological female come in pants and shirts, and that's, in that way, that's more socially acceptable now anyway, right? But the opposite is maybe not as generally acceptable, but would that be okay under the policy? There was an example about that too in one of them. I don't know if that was Hawaii.
Chair, could we go back up to what Jenny wrote? I just want to see if she'd be willing to take a couple of changes here.
Well, we can do whatever. This is just a suggested, so.
Let's
Are you
go.
okay, Chair?
Yes, please.
Dress codes and uniform policies should offer gender neutral options. Okay, and I don't think you need the rest of it. Uniform, then I'm going to skip down to the next one where students may, I'm looking at in the black part at the bottom, students may dress in accordance. I don't want to say that either. School personnel should not enforce a school's dress code. Oh gosh. Okay, now I totally lost it. So I go, dress codes and uniform policies should offer gender neutral options. And I'm not even sure we need to say that, but they should offer, and somebody help me, they should offer options that eliminate distractions, attention seeking, and comply with the LEA's policies.
Hmm. Yeah, dress code and uniform policy should comply with the LEA's policies. We're given guidance on what their policy should look like.
Well, I get that, but I think there's all kinds of different things that cause distractions. So, and I realize that this is a gender policy or working on, or guidance document that we're working on. Just-
Yeah. So is it distracting then if a biological male comes to school in a traditionally female dress?
So I see what you're saying. Dress codes and uniform policies should offer, it should be, I'm not sure what word we should have there, but not necessarily gender neutral, because you're not gender neutral if you're wearing a dress. Okay, it's really much more than that. Okay, should
But,
offer.
yeah, I think Jenny's point was that some uniforms at some schools, the girls need to wear a skirt and a polo shirt or whatever, and the boys wear slacks and a polo shirt. I don't know if we have any more of those left in the state, but that traditionally that was the case with some schools that required uniforms, the charters.
Oh, I do like what Patty just put there.
Mhm.
That's from Virginia.
Mhm. And then what about that last sentence on that one? School personnel should not enforce the dress code more strictly.
I actually have a problem with saying they shouldn't enforce a rule that their district has, but they should
Right,
enforce
consistently.
them consistently for all students.
Well, yeah, it just says more strictly. So I think that's implying, that's the negative of the consistently, right?
And I'd rather have the positive there.
Okay. So
Consistent.
dress code should be assessed consistently or enforced consistently for all students.
Yeah, something along those lines, please. Thank you.
Mhm.
One of the examples, though, that I was reading, I can't find it right now, was about a male cheerleading. Oh, it's on page 15, example 2. A student who appears to be male is accepted into the cheerleading team and wants to wear the girls' cheerleading uniform. Regardless of whether the student is transgender or not, the student should be allowed, and it goes on. How does that fit with that definition? And do we care?
And I think what Brent's doing is what I was trying to do. We need to test our guidance and see how it works in some real world examples.
Well, we're
There
testing
may
the
be-
fences. If that's the requirement and he wants to be on the cheerleading squad in a skirt cheerleader outfit, then as long as he's complying with the LEA's guidelines for appropriate attire, then to me, when we're testing the fences, like you're saying here, Chair, I think that's tested.
Okay. So what's the proposal now? Those 3 paragraphs that we have, or is the bottom one not included?
I wasn't including the bottom one, but let me reread if I may.
Well, I think that was just the top paragraph of the Hawaii document. We had some sentences we were looking at, but yeah, go ahead.
If I may just, I'm thinking it's just the offer. I just need to reread, sorry. I don't know that we need all of it, but those are close to what I would appreciate.
I'm sorry, on including the 3rd paragraph?
No,
No, just the top 2, okay? Dress codes and uniform policy should offer options that eliminate distractions or attention seeking behavior. I don't think we can say dress codes and uniform policies should offer options that are defined by a policy. Is that one policy and another policy that we're talking about, or? Do we need that defined by an LEA's policy on the end of that first sentence?
I think it was as defined in their policy because each district has different dress code policies. So And maybe dress codes and LEA policies should offer options that eliminate distractions and attention-seeking behavior.
I like that better, if that's where we're going with this. That works better where we don't have policy in there twice.
Board member Belknap, can you state that one more time? Which word are we getting rid of?
Sorry, Patty, I had a heater on in my room and I had to turn it down. Dress codes and uniform, dress codes and LEA policies should offer options that eliminate distractions or attention-seeking behavior. So we're asking them to have that in their policies and then the rest of it.
Okay, so for example, a dress code would say that your underwear needs to be covered and you can't have bare shoulders, or no shorts that go above the knee line, something
Or
like
your
that.
belly showing or whatever, and those LEAs can determine that in their own local areas.
That would be consistent for male, female. Just no gender or gender specific or stereotypes there.
If you can think of somewhere where we need to test that fence, I can't think of one, but you may have one.
No, I'm good. Okay, so we okay with this one? So the male cheerleader example and the biological male dressed in typical, or I guess stereotypical female dress, a dress, that would be okay, as long as it covered underwear, covered, was down to the knees, covered their belly, all the things that are in the policy.
Whatever's in the LEA policy.
Okay. We good? Committee members?
Yeah, I just, for reference, and we don't need to discuss this, but on page 16 under Maryland, they give a good verbiage, old practice versus new practice. And anyway, it's kind of interesting. Let's move on, but it's something maybe to look at later.
Okay. Well, and that may be an example that staff can help us with on this one as well. Okay.
Also, just for clarity here, I don't believe this should be in green, because the green parts were supposed to be the ones we couldn't come to a decision on, right? And the red, thank you, Patty.
Okay, great. Okay,
I'm just going to say this. I think this is thin. It's supposed to give guidance to LEAs, and what we're doing is we're dumping the responsibility back on the LEA policy of their dress code. So I just think this is thin. I don't think it says enough to really give guidance.
so Janet, help us. What would you add to?
Well, I've been looking through these other things, and I'd probably add some. Now I went to look up where Brent was, and I lost where I was. I like the verbiage about gender neutral. I like what you were saying, Scott, about clothing should cover underwear, those kinds of things. I just think they're more specific and would be more helpful for teachers who are dealing with this.
But
Yeah.
do we want to write the school's dress code for them though, or do we just want to tell them how to make the dress code applicable in these kind of gender identity situations?
Do you think we've sufficiently done that, Scott, in this?
personally, I'm probably okay with this, just so it's consistent for both sides. And, they've already got a dress code. They just need to go in and clean it up to make sure that it's not so gender specific. But they probably already have a code that says, no baseball hats, no, they can't wear shoulder bearing clothes, no spaghetti straps or whatever. And they would just clean that up so it applies to both and not just to girls or just to boys.
Okay, I was back looking at Hawaii where they say all students should be permitted to wear the clothing of their choice, regardless of whether it conforms to traditional gender stereotypes, providing such clothing does not violate the school's dress code.
So does that add to what we have here if we were to put that on, or does that already fit with what we have?
So we do have free of gender stereotypes, Janet. I think that's helpful.
This is for Jerry, this point of order. I just got a text that said that the audio on YouTube is just coming through. They can't hear anyone, or it's all garbled. I don't know if there's anything we can do about that, but if there is, maybe that would be of value.
I'll check.
Okay. Yeah, that's too bad. We're having technical difficulties all around tonight.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, well, we'll move on. I just am expressing my opinion.
okay. And again, I think we'll have this cleaned up and have it in backup, and then we'll be able to go in and finesse things and add to or subtract if we need to. Let's move then forward. And I see Brian's put some stuff in the chat. We
I was
can't,
just regarding the previous issue about proof of gender identity.
yeah. So Jenny, did you read that in the chat?
No, I didn't know we were using the chat tonight, but I can.
Yeah, I guess we're okay to do that in committee meetings, just not board meetings.
I specifically asked Jerry to enable chat.
So let me just read it. So because transgender students are often unable to obtain identification documents that reflect their gender identity. So we're not asking for a birth certificate change, right? But okay. Due to restrictions imposed by state or local law, would place in there, sorry, this is moving on me. Requiring students to produce such identification documents in order to treat them is inconsistent with the gender identity may violate Title IX. Doing so has a practical effect of limiting or denying students equal access to an education program. I once again, I don't think that's what a doctor's, or a healthcare professional it is necessarily, but I could see how that could be limiting. So.
Yeah, read the next one as well. He's got
An
one.
agency may not condition access to facilities or to other terms, conditions, or privileges of employment on the completion of certain medical steps that the agency itself has unilaterally, sorry, I'm moving this again, determined will somehow prove the bona fides of the individual's gender identity. And that's out of what? That's a Dear Colleague letter. So
Well, that's a case that's referenced in the footnote 6 of the Dear Colleague letter.
okay, and that's out of what area? Do we know? Our area?
No, it's another jurisdiction. It's not Utah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's an employment case as well, but now the
Yeah.
employment cases are being brought over into the Title IX.
Which then changes what Title IX originally was, but yeah, we're changing what the intent was, but interpretation.
So let's just leave that as it is. It may be on shaky ground trying to require documentation based on just this, but there may be some more information too. So let's go forward instead of back. So we're on overnight trips now.
Scott, before you leave dress code, there was one sentence in the black part that I thought, okay, so dress codes, including hairstyles, should encompass broad guidelines that are not gender specific and are free of gender stereotypes. I just think that, yeah, I just think that should be a little
Yeah,
more
Okay.
specific. Thank you.
okay, thanks. That moves us then down to the overnight trips. And so this is accommodations on overnight trips. It looks like the general consensus with the documents we have is kind of the same as restrooms and locker room facilities. The kids are entitled to stay in the rooms with the kids of the sex they identify with. But then they can request to stay in a single occupancy room, or other students can request to stay in a single occupancy, but the transgender kids can't be required to stay in a single occupancy. So that's what we're seeing here in the different policy or different guidance documents. Jenny, go ahead.
I'm just not understanding. I'm sorry. So what, maybe walk me through this. So the other children's parents do or do not have a right to say something or know about it? I just, how does this work? Or is that considered a violation of a student?
Let's have Brian fill us in on that.
Walk me through it.
Privacy rights of the transgender child are right in the middle of this. So go ahead, Brian.
And parents' rights.
Right, so this is a little complicated. It's generally the same as bathrooms, Chair Hanson, as you've indicated. So let's say a student is on the choir, transgender student, and it notifies the coach, or sorry, not the coach, the leader. And so you just cannot discriminate against that child because of their status. Trick then becomes, how do you kind of give notice to parents of all the students in the choir that if they have a concern or they request themselves an accommodation, that they can just ask, and administration would work with them. So without divulging the privacy concerns of the transgender student, there's got to be a way that you can still communicate with all the parents and see if there's any requests for accommodations from any of the parents, which I think can be done. I think schools are managing this by just communicating and talking and being creative of how they assign hotel rooms on these overnight trips. They're just trying to avoid overnight trips altogether.
So Brian, if there is a transgender student that's participating in a group, say it's a band or a choir, and they do the Disneyland tour and are down there for a couple of days, the school can't say that because this student is on the trip that we're going to notify all the parents and say, do any of you have a problem with your kid staying in a room with this student? Can't do that because of privacy concerns, right?
Correct.
But you're postulating that maybe there's a way that we could say, we do have transgender students in our school. Parents, please tell us if you desire an accommodation so that your children are not placed in rooms with these transgender students.
That's right. And I think that approach preserves the transgender student's privacy.
So there'd be just a generic right, wouldn't be a specific case that the parents are requesting the accommodation. They just request the accommodation on a general level and say, yeah, I'm not comfortable with that. My child's not comfortable with that situation. So please make sure that my child's not placed in a room with that's a transgender student, or my child is placed in a single occupancy room.
And you're assuming that the administration can't already work something out between the transgender student and a friend, transgender student and a parent, or some other accommodation, so they don't even need to give this notice to the entire choir. So I think some flexibility is in order for the local administrators to try and work something out.
What if it's a small group, Brian? I mean, not a choir,
Yeah.
but a basketball team or something where just sending out the letter to all the parents would kind of identify.
Sure.
Is that?
That's a tough one right there. That's a tough one. So I think you just encourage them to do their best to accommodate all the interested parties. That's gonna be a hard one right there to tell them specifically what to do in the guidance document.
Chair Hansen.
Yeah.
Wondering if Jeff could go to Illinois I3, and it speaks to best practices for schools. And it kind of is answering some of these questions that you were asking of AAG Quisenberry.
Mhm.
And it puts it very simply. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Okay, this helpful with regard to the transgender student, but maybe not so helpful, at least not that I can see with regard to the other students.
1-2,
What's that?
1-2 on page 19.
I too. Okay, yeah, I read that going into this, and that's why I had the question for Brian. So how do other students seek accommodations if the trip is not the basis to disclose or require disclosure of a student's transgender identity?
Also, not all coaches and teachers know about these students. It may just be something in the admin.
Jenny?
I don't think 2 quite hits the mark. It's in other words, it's saying if, you've got to keep it confidential. And if for some privacy reason, it sounds like that person has to figure out at least this wording. I don't think it quite works. Saying that individual is the one that has to seek their own private room. Am I reading that correctly? If they're assigned to a room with someone, of course, I think reaching out to the student in advance would be the easiest way to make an appropriate accommodations, because there may already be accommodations that they've been able to work out. But is this saying that if you, I don't know, do you see what I'm saying? Is it saying that the other student has to pay for a private facility or their own private room or something? Or are you not quite that way?
The school's on the hook for, the facilities. They can't require a student to pay for their own. I don't think that would fly at all. I guess I'm back to one of my original questions. So if when there's a trip, if the transgender students' gender identities not to be disclosed, which I understand there's a privacy concern there, then could we have, say at the beginning, when the kids sign up for that particular, co-curricular, extracurricular activity, and they sign up to be in the choir, could there be an information sheet that says that, we have transgender or gender nonconforming students in our student population? In the event that there's a overnight travel, do you have privacy concerns about your child, staying in the same room with that child? And then if there's just a yes or no on that, the parents have that option to opt out. And there's no privacy, there's nothing revealed by doing that. Would that work to meet the needs of, both sides of this issue, where the parents would not for the specific situation, but for the whole general, activity say, my child doesn't want to be in the same room as a transgender child.
Scott, may I suggest on this one, we might need to get more in depth on legal, what we can do here. just because of so many violations that could happen for both the transgender child and the other child.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear. I'd just like to narrow down what we want to ask. I think it's pretty clear what we should be doing for the transgender child. Are we all agreeing on that? It's really the concerns of the other children in the class that we're hung up on. Am I right or no?
Just as long as there's a way to protect that child, our LGBTQ child, from, outing them. I don't know what other word to use here. I'm sorry, that's probably not appropriate, but.
Yeah.
Chair Hansen, if scrolls down to Maryland, there's one sentence in there. Make efforts to it's the very last part, make efforts to accommodate any student who desires greater privacy. However, a transgender, and this might be the part for AAG, Cuisinart, transgender or gender nonconforming students should not be isolated.
Yeah. Okay, I think we can ask for more help. I guess for me, the key issue is, how do other students know that they want to make a request for more privacy if we can't disclose that there's the transgender child that's on the trip? And I can see the privacy concerns. I just don't know how other kids would know. They show up at a location, they say, you four are assigned to sleep in this hotel room, 2 queen beds sometimes, 2 to a bed. And they find out, oh, I'm not comfortable with this situation. So then to raise it then is way too late. Then we've got all kinds of issues, right? Because we're dealing with it real time. So I'm trying to think how that might be dealt with ahead of time.
And our gender nonconforming student may end up being isolated, not by their choice, but by everyone else's choice.
Well, there may not be other rooms available. You get to a place and so it needs to be thought out ahead of time. And I think all of these guidance documents talk about that. Hey, this is a sensitive situation. We need to plan ahead. But again, I think my question for the AAG is if we can have some kind of a blanket. Hey, I'm not a transgender child, but I would like to have accommodations where I'm not placed in a room with the transgender child, without revealing identities or even saying there's one on the trip, so the coaches can plan it out. Brian, is that?
Yeah,
clear?
it's clear. It is clear. Let me see what I can do. Let me do some research here.
Okay, because I think this one
that is tricky though. This is definitely.
Yeah, both sides, I think, need some protection on this one, on both sides of the situation. We okay to move to the next one then? With that being said, we'll adopt the language that's consistent with regard to how to accommodate the transgender child, and then we'll get some research done on how to accommodate the needs or desires of the other children. Laura, you okay?
Yeah, I think we have to be, Chair Hansen, are we supposed to be done at 8:30?
I don't think so. I think we had till 9. Is it 8?
9? That's not what it said on our agenda.
Oh, okay.
I thought it said 9:30.
I was working.
Well, Miss Janet.
Hang on. Let's take a look.
I just want to make sure, plus some of our staff and you have not had an opportunity to even have a break in this amount of time.
Yep, that's true. What was the notice sent out for? I thought that we were good until later this evening. I thought that we were 9.
Nora Lee?
It's a 3-hour meeting on the calendar.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have it on my calendar until 9 o'clock. So I was working to a different schedule. I think that's what we requested, was until 9.
I'm looking at the
It shows
anticipated
9:30.
adjournment and it says 9:30.
Okay. Well, I'm certainly ready to go as long as we can to make some headway here, because the alternative is going to be schedule another meeting. So if you say you have to go, Laura, then you'll have to go. If we have enough that can stick around, we'll go until at least 9 o'clock.
No, Chair, I don't have to go. What I was just trying to say is that you haven't had a break in 3 hours, nor has some of the staff, for example, they haven't had any opportunity for a short break.
Okay, would you like to suggest a 5-minute break?
Yes, or 3 minute, or whatever we can do it in.
Yes.
Let's do that. We'll come back at 8:35. Looks like we're all here. I believe that we were at a point where we were leave the overnight trips issue with our AAG to get us some more information and move on to records and privacy. Is that where we are? Let's do that then. So this is, well, Brian, why don't you give us the legal overview if you can get through to us so we can hear you.
I relocated here, so let me know if you can't hear me. Let's see, so records privacy, so FERPA is essentially the governing law here, federal law. It requires that a student's transgender status has to be protected. It cannot be divulged to as best as possible to other students, other parents. And then records also, it allows a parent access to any record regarding the student. So anything that's on a computer system or that's in writing, a parent would definitely have access to. Those are kind of the overarching two principles I think we're dealing with.
So how does this play out? I mean, we have a couple of different scenarios, but say the parents come into the school, they request that records be changed for a biological female to state that that they're identifying as male, and that information gets into the records, and then that's not disclosed to any other students in the school or any teachers. So if the school was if the student was a transfer student, then basically that previous the birth sex wouldn't be known to anyone in the school. Is that right? Other than the administrators who make the change?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, that's the easy one because the parents are on board with it. And what if a student requests that they, can any changes be made based on a student's request?
Yeah, the student can request an accommodation, but again, if it's made to the system, the computer system, then a parent has a right to, under FERPA, to see that. So there's not a way for a student to shield that system change from a parent.
Okay, but what's required in our schools for a change to be made to the records now? If say the change wasn't having to do with transgender status, can a student just go and request a change, like an address change or some other change to their records, or does that have to be made through their parent and guardian?
I do not know the answer to that off the top of my head. I'd have to look at that unless another staff member might know that offhand.
Okay.
Let me see if I can pull that statute.
Okay, Scott, you said something that first one was easy if a parent comes in and requests it, but does that mean it can be changed on official reports and standardized tests like Hawaii's first sentence here? At a request?
I think that it's easy because I think parents can make changes to the, can request changes to the records, and the school can require some kinds of documentation for certain record changes, but I think that parents can generally request that. I may be wrong. That's why I'm asking Brian what it takes to change the records.
Any of it. Yeah, I appreciated that.
But I'm thinking that
Just,
with the parents are involved, it's an easier case than if the student just requests it. So Brent, go ahead. I cut you off.
so there is a, on the second page of that document from the attorneys, second to last paragraph talks specifically about the privacy point on that. Can that be brought up, or?
So sorry, this is the letter that we received.
So this is the one that was to you and to Deputy Superintendents Norman and Stallings.
Was that from our attorney, Brent?
Yeah, it's the
Okay,
attorney.
so we probably should be cautious.
Well, it is in our documents for this meeting.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Brent.
Yeah, so this is from the district, the LEA attorneys, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
second page, second to last paragraph begins, "We are also concerned." I don't know if I buy this completely, but it's what they say, so I think we need to take it into consideration.
what does it say, Brent?
You
Yeah,
want me
what
to
does it
read
say?
I was hoping they'd
Yeah.
bring it up on the screen, but I'd be glad to read it if need be.
Please.
We are also concerned about the third bullet point regarding privacy of information that would reveal a student's transgender status. Some districts have figured out how to add a preferred name and or gender to its student information system while maintaining the legal name in a separate screen that is confidential and only accessible to certain school staff. However, a student information system like Weber's does not have that capacity. Weber can include a preferred name and preferred gender, but the student's legal name is still visible on that same screen, and anyone, teachers, counselors, administrators, etc., who has access to the student's information will see a legal name that is different from a preferred name and gender, and will know the student's transgender status. The guidance that directs schools to keep transgender status confidential from all employees without a need to know is well-intentioned, but technically not an option for many LEAs at this point. And I have some thoughts on that, but that's what they said, so I'm going to leave it at that. That's one of their concerns.
Brent, help me understand the concern specifically. Is it that they don't want, I'm trying to understand, because if anybody has access to that system, you're saying they need a secondary, they're saying they need to keep a secondary, do you know what I mean? Does that
Here it
make sense?
is, next page. Here it
Okay.
is, Jenny.
All right, I just trying to understand their rationale.
Well, I think some of the rationale isn't necessarily, well, I'm not going to say anything. I question parts of it, but this is what they say is a concern, and it begins with "we." Let's scroll up just a little bit. There you go.
But if teachers or counselors have access to the SIS system, they are bound by FERPA laws. Having that information doesn't allow them to transfer that information.
Yeah, I think that summarizes one of my thoughts. Yeah.
Jenny or Brian, under Utah law, what are the parents' rights in terms of having this kind of information disclosed to them as a parent?
Well, I would answer that saying that
they have the right to kind of receive access to this. And I was looking at one Utah LEA's policy that's if the student is a minor, so if they're under age 18, that they need a parent to make a request to change their student information. But then you read the Weber paragraph here. And you read Weber here, and they can accommodate a change with like a preferred name or preferred gender, but a parent would have access to that change.
Well, and the idea, I mean, this is right from our book, is that that schools and teachers and schools are in a position of power when it comes to soliciting information from students. As such, laws have been passed by both federal level and state level, which are FERPA, as well as the Pupil Protection Rights Amendment. And the reason why is that they're to ensure transparency, protect parents' rights, protect student privacy in cases where sensitive information may be collected. So, that's why those were designed.
So the legal question, Brian, is, so FERPA was designed to allow parents and students to have privacy with regard to their education records, right? And then when a student, if I understand correctly, when a student turns 18, they can actually block their parents from accessing their education records if they want to.
Yes.
But we're talking about, and a lot of these example guidance documents say that there should be a student's right to have certain education records that aren't accessible to parents. And I don't know where the basis in law is for that. Is there any basis for that? Utah's also got some Utah specific laws that we'll talk about, but is there a basis in law that says that students have that right?
That they can shield their parent, they're a minor, and they can shield their parent from seeing their educational records. I would say no. I don't see a basis for that. I think FERPA is the opposite of that.
Okay, and I tried to look at some of the, what's going on in the law. There are a couple of active lawsuits by parents where LEAs or districts have taken the stance that's in some of these policies, but I don't know if there's any settled law on this one. Brian, have you found anything that?
There's very little FERPA law, but why don't we add that to my list of homework just to verify that there's no helpful cases that expand on this issue, this FERPA issue. Because
I think, and I think the information that Jenny sent out as well would say this, that Utah, in almost every case, the parents are notified of what's going on at school with their child. We have opt-out on sex ed things, so parents know about that. We have notification if the children are having, if there's a reasonable risk of suicide, or if the child is talking about that needs to go to parents. There are many places where that's referenced in the law, and I don't. This one isn't specifically referenced that I could see. I don't know, Jenny, did you find anything dealing specifically with transgender? I didn't see anything in the law.
No, nothing under that. But I do have it. Yeah, go ahead. And then I do have an additional question on this.
But everything else about school, Utah's by default, notify parents. So I'm just wondering what legal grounds there would be to keep parents not in the loop on what's going on if their child requests an accommodation. Okay, so that's my request. Jenny, go ahead.
Yeah, and then I did have a question. Can a school maintain a separate system? And what I mean by that, I guess some various systems set up in different ways that may have, a teacher access and stuff, but can they maintain two systems, one that is the official system and then a separate system that has confidential information that they keep from parents? It sounds like that's not the case, but it sounds like maybe that's what's happening, or did I misunderstand what the districts were had on here. Maybe I misunderstood.
I don't think it was ever from parents, but they were able to keep it from, I should let.
From
Linda-
other people within the school system, is that what you're referring to? Okay. But they're, okay, not necessarily notifying parents unless a parent comes in and requests, so that's right.
And I don't know that that one was about parents in that case, that Brent brought up.
Okay,
So
the
talking about,
privacy within the school.
talking about formal changes to a student's records is one thing, and I think that the answer may be straightforward on that, but what about, so I'm looking at the Texas document that we have, and it says, in contrast to permanent school records, however, teachers and other school district employees often informally address students by and have non-permanent school records that reflect preferred names or nicknames that are not a student's legal first name. This says a school district should apply this practice equally with transgender students. So, and I think, every kid isn't known by their whole formal, first and middle name in school. The teachers say, your name is Charles. Do you want to be called Charlie or Chuck? And the student says, yeah, this is what I like to be called by, their nickname. So when we're talking about pronouns or preferred names for students, how does it jive with that? How does it fit in with that scenario? And I see Brian's hands up.
Yeah, Chair. So we're talking about not a formal change to the school's information system, but a kind of a verbal, informal between the student and their teacher saying, instead of calling me Brian, call me Brianna, as kind of a nickname. And so the principle I think that applies here is teachers have to treat nicknames the same with a student that goes by their birth gender. So if a boy is Charles and he wants to be called Charlie or Chuck, the teacher doesn't go to the parent and ask for permission in that scenario. So similarly, if the child wants to be called by their gender identified nickname, then they have to be treated the same. Otherwise, it would be construed, I think, as discrimination, that you're treating disparately the transgender student with a preferred nickname versus the non-transgender student and a preferred nickname.
Okay, and thank you. But Texas also references OCR and DOJ's 2021 guidance that I'm just looking at that paragraph there that cites a failure to address a transgender student by the student's chosen name and pronouns as an example of sex-based discrimination within the agency's enforcement authority under Title IX. So is that where we are with the law?
That's
the most
that was
recent OCR guidance, right?
Yes, that was what I was trying to say.
But could it be that in this document, we say any nicknames that are being used must be verified by the parent, and no matter what it is, Charles to Charlie, that has to be verified by the parent. Then there's no discrimination there.
You could take that position. I think you'll get significant pushback from teachers and administrators on more of a practical nature that regarding every single nickname that is requested to be used.
Okay, so trying to think about how we craft a guidance document about our records. Are we, permanent records with regard to the school, I think it's pretty clear cut that those should only be changed based on their standard policies where parents have to request changes. They have documentation for some changes. We're not advocating for any change to that policy, are we, or that way of maintaining records? Is there anybody on the committee that thinks that should be looked at?
But I'm not sure that parents, even at this point, in some places can go in and request a change without some other documentation.
No, what I'm saying is those policies should just remain as is. We're not advocating for a change to the way those are done now. Is that what,
As is where?
with the LEA's current policies for maintaining those records? I mean, we can dig into all the details of that, but I believe that they right now keep those records on with some kind of guidelines in place so that, you know, people can't just change those on a whim.
I hope they do.
Well, I just know I mean, and this was brought up in Health and Human Services, but currently by law, in order to change your birth certificate, you have to get, you have to go through a court order and everything. That's what happens there. So I'm not sure that a parent can a parent just come in and say, change this and this and this. And then, you know, I'm just, can that just happen? Can they just do that?
I would say yes, that's what Weber does. They accommodate the parents that way.
So they don't request any legal anything, just come in and make changes.
Well, I'm not talking, to change name, yeah, then you need a court order, but to ask that the school use a preferred name or a nickname.
Okay, well, I can see that. I meant like on their official documents. That's what I'm asking.
Oh, all
about.
right, I thought you were more informal, yeah.
Oh, no.
Official.
Documentation.
Yeah,
That's right.
official documentation.
I think
That's
we're
right.
still with official documents, and what, I don't know the exact process, but I believe that controls are in place on changing official records. And I don't hear anyone on the committee or any of the scenarios that we're considering now that would say that we want to change that. Is that right? We don't want to give them guidance that says that the official records can be changed by some other method than what they're already using.
No, I think there's got to be some kind of, and part of the reason why is because you may even have a difference between parents themselves, right? And so to say one parent could come in and change and another parent could then come in and change a different way. You've got to, especially with those legal documents, you've got to have a set way of doing that. It can't be, you know, someone's.
Yeah, I'm trying, I guess, to move us off of that changes to permanent records and to the one that's more common where, you know, these preferred names and pronouns, you know, how we control that or how that should be controlled in the schools. So are we okay to move to that? That seems to be the point that where there's some differences of opinion. Go ahead, Brett.
Chair Hansen.
I can't, sorry,
Okay. Patty, did you have something that we should hear before, then we'll jump to Brent?
I'm just wondering if it could be helpful if we could have a starting paragraph. I think that kind of debating some of these words without having some words to look at is kind of difficult. So I'm wondering if we look at Illinois and it doesn't have to start this way, but something that is the agreed upon statement that everyone agrees upon first, and then to move to the pronouns or that conversation. So this is something that just kind of is a, you know, here's something that maybe is not an agreed upon statement, and then to be able to then further delineate down to then what happens with pronouns, or, you know, who has access. If you go further down in Illinois, and I'll highlight it really quick, then it speaks to on this where I've highlighted it, Jeff, about students having the right to access and review records. And then there's some wording in there that we can maybe pull up to get some examples down, some concrete examples. And I apologize, Board Member Straight.
Yeah, we'll go to Board Member Straight, but that paragraph that we're on right now cites a lot of Illinois code.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
Careful about that, but go ahead, Brent, and then we'll come back to Patty's suggestion. Go ahead.
let's stay in the direction we're going for now.
Okay, which direction?
Go back to Patty.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if we go to that first part of the Illinois piece that reference Illinois law. And so it's just right off, Jeff, you scroll up. And if committee members can look at that to see if there's any changes with that, we can take, any citations or whatnot and keep scrolling. It's just the very, very beginning right there, just that first kind of paragraph. If we can just work from that and then work to the next level on that maybe.
I don't love Illinois' item. I was just trying to
Is there a
some-
different state?
I'm looking.
I think that first paragraph of Illinois is a pretty direct statement of FERPA.
Well, except for it doesn't indicate any, let's see. Let me read down it again. So the intent is to what? Just state what the current law is and the issue around it, right? Is that?
Patty's just trying to get something on the paper so that we can build off of it.
Just because I think this is lacking. I'm just reading off of what we have on our site, but it says the FERPA annual, this is the annual notification, but this is what needs to be in the annual notification. Must include information regarding a parent's rights to inspect and review his or her child's education records, the right to seek to amend the records, the right to consent to disclosure of personal identifiable information from the records, and the right to file a complaint. So are those pieces in there?
Well, as far as notification, what we're looking at right there, that first, well, now I got to expand it a little bit. Well, I think was a fair summary of FERPA.
Well, and we've cut off some on that.
I just included what Board Member Earl said. Jeff, can you scroll a little bit so we can see both paragraphs? Or I'm sorry, up. There we go. Up. There we go. And so the red is what Board Member Earl just read.
Okay, what if we just said that parents have a right to, because we don't really care about we're not telling them how to do FERPA and that they have to send out an annual notification. What if we said parents have a right to inspect and review his or her child's education records, the right to seek to amend the records, the right to consent to disclose to the disclosure of personal identifying information, and the right to file a complaint regarding an alleged failure by the school to comply with FERPA.
I would add to that, a school must guard each student's privacy from unwarranted disclosures within the school setting.
Okay, that's already up in that paragraph above on the unwanted disclosures. Student information must be and records must be kept confidential and not disclosed without permission of the student, except to employees. But does that cover it, Jenny, up there?
Yeah, I think that does. That does. Thanks.
Okay, then we've got a hanging sentence in the middle of this that we need to deal with. Disclosure of private, oh, yeah, right there.
Do we need to also attach anything with HIPAA in here too, or not really? Do you feel like that? Because there could be mental health services associated with any student, but
Is the HIPAA stuff, is there anything different about dealing with HIPAA for transgender students than there is with just general student population? It's the same, right? Same HIPAA concerns?
Yes.
The thing that makes it different for transgender is that we have the sex at birth and then the preferred gender identity that might be well, it would be in conflict with one another for a transgender child. And then, that's what creates the issues, right? That we have to deal with. So does this get us started? Are we okay with those?
I think it's a good start, but I still want to know how we change permanent records, how parents change them. And I think Brian's going to look into that.
Okay. So then if we leave that as an action item, a request for help, then do we move on now to talk about preferred pronouns and preferred names that wouldn't be necessarily part of the permanent? What if they don't want to change the permanent record? They just want to be called a student or a student's parents want the child to be called by preferred pronouns and a preferred name that don't match with their permanent record.
So Chair, you're skipping from records, privacy, confidentiality down to preferred pronouns now?
I kind of am, because they show up in the records, right, somewhere. So
Okay.
maybe I'm lumping them together. Can we just leave this and move to that, or are they? I'm blending them together because I think they kind of tie together. I'm happy to, if this is enough on the records, then I think we can just move down the list.
For clarification, am I deleting the first part up here in the red and the green are what's left?
No.
All there. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think all of it's on there. Okay. So taking Laura's suggestion, we can just leave this one. I won't conflate the two. And if this is good for this section, then we'll move to physical education. And this, as I read through what I know of the law, and Brian will ask you to comment, it seems that this is the same general guidance as we have on the use of facilities. So sincerely held gender identity. If the gender identity is female, then they can participate with the females. This isn't competitive sports. This is, gym class activities and things. But is that the way the law is, Brian?
Yeah, yes, just in general, you can't discriminate on the basis of the gender identity.
So Brian, one question on that. What about with, what if they're playing some kind of a contact sport during their PE class? Because that's where the concern comes in during with the sports. And anyways, I'm just wondering.
Can you think of an example? I'm thinking football, but I don't think that's played during PE.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to think through some scenarios, right? So.
Yeah, I don't know, Jenny, and Brent's probably been in this school at this level more recently than I have, but I don't know of any contact sports that are PE sports. I think most of those now have gone to there's no wrestling, there's no football, they're not doing lacrosse or anything, rugby. It's generally non-contact kind of sports, but does anybody have any other information that would say that's wrong? So are we safe to say that the High School Athletics Association is dealing with the contact sports issues on this? Are we nodding?
Yeah, I think
Brent,
for now.
Yeah, that's what you think, Brian. And Brent, you sat down with the high school athletics people, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So
May I make a comment?
Yeah, sorry, Janet.
As staff goes through and we're looking to organize these things, it seems to me like we have sort of we have a list of things that, well, they all refer to gender issues, but I'm wondering if we could organize them so that the physical education and the locker rooms and the restrooms, some of those things that go together, if they could be organized together as seems, as they seem to flow, so that.
Okay, let's make that request of staff, that we try to organize by related topics, I guess. Facilities, physical education, overnight trips, maybe together, records, privacy, confidentiality, maybe go with names and,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Brent, you got your hand up. You've been good to do that tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Janet on that. Just a general observation. It seemed like as a teacher that as we worked through these issues, it just didn't seem as complicated as it feels tonight. And so I guess my thing is when it's your student and you're working through these issues and you are working through these ideas with pronouns and records and privacy and all that, it's your student. It feels different than when you're talking about it on this giant document that's supposed to provide direction. So in some ways, I think what we lack in this discussion is the perception of building principals or administrators and teachers. And because sometimes I think we're missing the mark, but in some ways I think we're going too deep into the subject sometimes. But anyway, in regards to physical education, yeah, so these issues overlap and intertwine themselves with so much. So heck, I remember when they had the very first co-ed PE class when I was in high school, and how odd everyone thought that was, and it's just not a big deal anymore.
Oh no, now we routinely have females wrestling, and we had the football, female football players as well. So things have changed a lot since those days, I think. So on this physical education, it seems to me that we could probably have staff just look at these examples like Hawaii. I think they all kind of match up and say that students should be allowed to participate with the group that includes those of their gender identity.
Let me just ask one question, because the example one there just says, a transgender female wants to dance the girl's part during a PE ballroom class.
Mm-hmm.
She can do that. Does the partner have to agree to that? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or that's what I'm saying is that, but we don't really, it's not addressed there. Of course, they can be allowed that, but there needs to be, so that there's mutual respect there, right? And there's not some kind of so I guess just making sure that that's part of the dialogue, so that there's not someone else doesn't feel uncomfortable to respect there.
Okay. I think that makes sense. When it's one-on-one like that, I can certainly see the point. Where it's teams, then I don't know. I mean, if we need to afford accommodations, or if that's something that needs to be done, like a female volleyball team or something like that, with a transgender female on it. But on the dance part, on that example one, I can see that maybe being something that we need to allow for. So you're saying another student shouldn't be compelled to dance the male part with the transgender female if they don't feel that that's appropriate for some reason.
I just think and once again, it would be like the other situations we've talked about is looking ahead a little bit, right? And, you know, maybe making sure others are comfortable too. So there's not so there doesn't open the door for something to be said or done that would be offensive to either person. So I just think being proactive, I suppose, is the idea, right?
Yeah, well, and in practice, I think in many cases, the kids will sort that out, you know, with the teacher, maybe with a little planning can make that work. But so what kind of a note should we make here about that? What direction can we give to staff on physical education?
Chair?
Yep, go ahead, Laura.
One of the thoughts I have on this one is something that Jenny was talking about, that that there can't be a teacher they need to hold them harmless, either one of these students, with the dancing, that they don't give, I don't even know if the term demerit is used anymore, but they don't mark them down in their score because they won't comply to dance or with somebody who's transgender, or maybe a transgender doesn't want to dance with somebody else.
Okay, so in general, students shouldn't be compelled to dance with a specific partner.
But they need to be held harmless, you know, and I'm not sure exactly how to do that, because it may not just be that. It may be wrestling partners. It may be, this is going to be this is bigger than what we're seeing, because what if they don't want to be on the same basketball team and there's 5 kids on that team and 5 on that one? Then what does the teacher do in that case? I mean, there's.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. I think in the one-on-one situation, then, you know, maybe the accommodation thing is appropriate, but when we get to a team sport, I don't know that we can make that work. Legally, I think we'd start to run into some problems.
So Chair Hansen,
Uh-huh.
I'm going to maybe speak from an educator perspective on this. I don't know that this might be the perfect example, or maybe it is. I'm remembering back to being a 6th grade teacher, and teaching dance was one of the things that we did. We did ballroom dancing, we did all of those. And that picking of partners would have, you know, a line and students lined up, and then they just partnered up, and it was about respect. We didn't want anyone to say, I'm not dancing with you. And I'm not sure if that, you know, I'm kind of channeling you, Board Member Earl, when you're saying it's about respect. Having anyone for any reason say, you know, like, I'm not dancing with you. How do we do that how do students do that in a respectful way, that it's not about, you know, their looks or their whatever that is, you know? I'm just trying to look at it from a teacher point of view. By saying that a student can't be compelled to dance with a specific partner, does that mean any sort of dancing of, you know, partner dancing is no longer going to be taught? Instead, it's all line dancing? Because does that make sense where I'm coming from? Like, what does that look like in the classroom?
That's gives us something to think about. What did you do when there were more girls than boys in the class? You were pairing up.
They could have cared less. They just all danced. Everybody just wanted to do it. So it was just, they were, you know, girls would dance with girls. We would have, they just did. It was just a part of the fun of it. So they didn't think about it a lot, but there was the rule at that time that we lined up and they just partnered with whoever they lined up with, and they didn't get to choose a partner, because then it became a popularity contest.
Okay, Brian, please go ahead.
I'm thinking of the slippery slope here. Just something to think about. If we make this kind of, well, if you don't feel comfortable or if you're squeamish about dancing with a transgender student, then what's next? What if it's, well, you don't feel like comfortable dancing with someone who's overweight, or you don't feel comfortable dancing with someone
with dark skin, or and that's the slippery slope right there. So at some point we have to. I'm reminded back in the '60s with the civil rights when they desegregated a class and you had one black student there, then all the white students wouldn't even show up, and it's just the black student that's there. So at some point we have to say, well, we can be respectful here and not kind of offensive by saying, "Ooh, I don't want to touch you because there's something about you that I just don't like." Just something to think of.
Hmm. Should we put this one in green? Jenny? Give us a chance to think about it.
I think there should be some thought behind there. I just think there's a courtesy to kids in general. All
I
children.
think we should say no one should have to dance with someone who has cooties.
There you go.
Maybe we shouldn't teach dance in high school.
Well, I was just thinking about, again, it's competitive sports, but in wrestling, there was a big deal for a while when girls first came into wrestling and some guys refused to wrestle with them and they took a loss, when that happened. So kind of applicable here as well, but it's not the same. This isn't competitive sports. Okay, let's leave that one in green and come back and see what we can do on that with a little bit more thought. Patty, have we given you and the team enough direction on this one? We think it's fairly straightforward, except for the issue that Board Member Earls raised on this.
Yes, I think we can move forward.
Okay, let's go to the next one. Other school activities and clubs. This one, you can see some of the examples, prom queen, prom king. Any time when clubs are separated into gender by gender, I think that what is going to follow from all the previous examples in law that we've heard is that the transgender students' gender identity is going to govern, which group they join in these areas. Are we comfortable with the Hawaii examples? Do we think we need to do something different than those? Just read through those. It's those I really.
What is this area again we're looking at? Other school activities?
This is other school activities. So we've talked about PE and now just expanding it. So prom king, prom queen, it would be the gender identity that would govern there. Next one, a performance where they're separated by gender, transgender go with their gender identity. The third one, the choir. If it's a girls' choir, a transgender girl should be permitted to audition for it. And then graduation, where we separate by gender, by color. This would say that transgender kids would wear the color that goes with their gender identity. So I don't think that's much different than what we've been talking about all the way along with facilities and things. Go ahead, Brent.
So one thing that actually happened at the high school I was at is everyone wore the same color. They did away with the two colors. It was just one color, and male, female, and that ended up working well. And I hate to go back, but I think it fits in here because I think we have to be very aware of people belonging, people feeling included, and some of these issues can be dealt with, and they can be dealt with in such a way that it's easy to deal with. But I just go back to that dance example, I just see that as potentially being so hurtful to an individual. And yeah, anyway, I think we sometimes sexualize way too many things. I think maybe that's what gets in the way of some of this dialogue, is we look at it from that lens instead of the lens of this person as an individual.
Thanks. I think as we, go back and consider that one, that will be something that we can all think through. Jenny, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just think we need to include, I have some language about clubs, but it's straight from the law. But I just think just putting that in there. So it's a school must obtain prior written parent consent included with the activity disclosure statement before attending or participating in any curricular or non-curricular clubs as required by, and it lists the law. Clubs shall not engage in or conduct mental therapy. Anyways, there's that piece there. Yeah, that's the section right there. There's a few other pieces to that, but people could read the law to seek that, but that would be under activities or clubs or other things. So.
Okay, so I didn't look at the code, Jenny, but so you've got the two citations, right, to 708 and
Yeah.
709. Then that language after that, is that from the code or is that?
That's from the code. It could be incorporated a different way if anybody wanted to.
Okay, well, if that's part of the code, the citation should probably go, so it includes all of it, because right now, it looks like the written parental consent's governed by 708 and 709, and then this other language, maybe.
Yeah, it's incorporated into 705. Yeah, however that would work best.
Okay. Well, we can cite to 705, so. Now, so this is already the law. What's the concern here, Jenny? I mean,
Just making sure parent consent and not just that the activity disclosure and the law specifies what needs to be on there. So making sure that's just in this particular area, if there's particular clubs whose focus is on, you've got clubs like GLSEN and such, whose focus is a particular group, although they are open to anybody that wants to attend. I just think that reiterating that this is what the policy looks like, this is what the law says.
So this is, well, it's governing clubs in general, not necessarily the issue of transgender participation in clubs, right?
Yeah, that would be accurate.
So I don't have a problem with what's in the law. I just wonder if we're expanding kind of what we're talking about.
Necessarily, because there are many clubs that are specific to certain groups. And so this is inclusive of that dialogue.
Can you name some?
GLSEN, GSA, Holly, what else is out there? There's some other ones.
Are they gender-based?
GLSEN is an organization. It's not a club. There are inclusivity clubs. There are GSAs, but they're not specific. They are all inclusive where anyone can join. So there's all different names.
Yeah, I guess I voiced my opinion. I think we're a little bit outside the scope on this one, but what do other committee members think?
Oh,
Well, I think it's helpful information. You know, it goes back to letting us know when parental consent is appropriate. And I just think that it's additional information, but I think it's good information to have.
So you think it fits with the purpose statement, I guess, for what we're trying to draft?
Well, I understand your point that this is something that applies to it to a more general nature overall,
Mhm.
but we're doing something specific here. And I think in Utah, we have an issue with our parents wanting to feel involvement and standing up for parental rights. And I think this is something that addresses it. And I don't know that we've specifically addressed it elsewhere in this document.
Okay, Laura? Haven't heard from you on this one.
Sorry, I'm just continuing to absorb. I'm not sure that I know where I want to go on this. Sorry, Chair.
Okay, no problem. Brent, you're good with this or not? Where are we?
I'm still at the questioning stage
Okay,
because I don't have enough information really on this in my mind.
do we want to put this one in green then and just leave it and move on? Okay, let's do that. Anything else on clubs, extracurricular activities? I think a statement like maybe referring to what Brent said, where schools may want to consider eliminating differentiation by gender when it's not, it doesn't serve a purpose. Or I don't think we want to tell them that they all need to dress in the same color, at graduation, or that they don't want to have the choir lined up with the, girls on one side and boys on the other. But there may be areas where it doesn't really serve a purpose and they can just eliminate the issue. Anything else on this one for clubs? Okay, let's keep going. Now we're finally to the one that we've been talking all around, the one that started us, I think. So this is on pronouns, preferred or requested names and pronouns. We talked a little bit about nicknames in classes and how that might apply to kids requesting to be called by other names other than their name or pronoun. And the first draft that we started discussing on this has some language about that, about that second paragraph. Well, let's hear the committee's thoughts on that. And really the big question is, can we refer to, or should we refer to children by anything other than their formal name and formal pronouns and pronouns that match their gender at birth without parental permission, I guess? Or how do we differentiate if we're going to do that sometimes and we're not other times? Who's
Chair Hansen?
Yes, please, Patty.
One of my roles for you today was to be the timekeeper. It's 9:34. I realize that we're not going to get through all of this, but I don't know if this would be a good stopping point and then to revise and to say what needs to be ready for the December board meeting, or if the December board meeting actually is where this committee finishes this work. I don't know if this is a good time or if you want to go through one more. I can go all night long as long as you guys want me to. That's just making sure that I was your timekeeper. So I'm
Thank you.
good job. And then
Appreciate
what
it.
we need to do
And-
next.
Yeah, we've used more than 10 minutes per item. I think everybody's aware of that. We tried to keep things moving along, but there's a lot to absorb. I think we've had some good discussions. Where are the committee members? I mean, if we have the committee members with us, are we okay to go for a little bit and get one more item out of the way or no? Committee members weigh in.
I am always the naysayer, but I have a very early morning meeting at 7 a.m. So
Okay. Okay. We ready to wrap things up then? We scheduled till 9:30, I think, is what I had it scheduled. So we're at schedule point, but we'll go ahead then and wrap things up. We need to give staff some guidance, I think, on how to go forward. I think we've given you that guidance on the topics that we discussed. We'll have to get the agenda item defined, I guess, on how we proceed, because I really think we need to hit these other items before we go back and finesse the ones that we've talked about. So my intent would be just to pick up with preferred names and pronouns with the time that we can allocate during our normal meeting. And then we'll see where we go from there. Hopefully we can all give this some good thought. And now we kind of have the lay of the land legally. We can maybe be ready to have another good discussion during our December meeting.
Scott,
Yes.
may I just give a shout out to staff for all the prep that we received for this meeting? And I mean, I read and I read and I read. And I just appreciate everything that they've done, everything they've given us. It's been well organized, it's been relevant, and I just want to express my appreciation.
No, appreciate that, Janet, and thank you. I see
Chair,
hearts
do
popping
you-
up.
do you think there's any way we can get through these other points and get back in our committee meeting on next Friday? I mean, on December's Friday?
Unless we do better than what we did tonight, no, we're not going to make it. This is going to continue for a while. So the discussion will be, how quickly do we need this document out? Do we need to try and schedule something else? I know we're coming into holidays as well. So right now we'll just block out as much time as we can during the normal meeting. You have another suggestion?
I don't know, Chair. I just,
Yeah.
I so appreciate your guidance in working us through this in this fashion. It's been very helpful.
Well, we always hope that we can accomplish a lot more, but I think that on this, we really need to get the lay of the land and understand it and work our way through it. So we can't go any faster than we can absorb. So here we are. Brent, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks to everyone. I know I was a little bit out of order at the first of the meeting, but I appreciate the format that it was in, and I thought it was organized and well prepared. I don't know that we could have been any more efficient than we were. I'm still not completely convinced that we're completely on the right track, but nonetheless, I do respect the process and want to continue working through it.
I appreciate that, Brent. And I think that we'll see where things are when we get to the educator responsibilities as well. If I understood your concerns, I think a lot of those we'll look at them, I'll have that discussion. But thank you to staff, thanks to committee members, thanks to members of the public that have hung with us this late. And we will reconvene and keep working through this. We have more items to knock out, and then we also need to go back and clean up a few things where we've asked for additional research. So this is a process, and we'll continue with it at our next opportunity. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.